Harry Potter. I didn't expect the Dark Lord to become my best friend. Chapter 41. I can't believe it. Professor McGonagall's expression was quite exciting. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. Do you want to explain why you are here? This is Gryffindor's know-it-all. Hermione has prepared well for every class and can answer almost all the professor's questions. She knows everything, so she is given this nickname. This is not considered in a complimentary sense. This is more to say that Hermione doesn't know how to restrain herself, she only knows how to show off. Now Hermione couldn't answer Professor McGonagall's question at all. She could only stare down at her slippers, motionless like a statue. I think I understand exactly what's going on. Professor McGonagall took a breath. You made up a set of lies out of thin air to tell Malfoy, telling him about a fire dragon or something, trying to trick him out of bed and make him miserable. Unexpectedly, Grindelwald was worried about Malfoy's safety and went to find me, let alone to think that Longbottom also heard this lie and believed it was true. I guess you must find this very interesting. Her eyes fell coldly on a few people, and were a little softer when they were directed at Serpilus. I feel very angry, said Professor McGonagall. 5 students stayed up one night. I have never heard of such a thing. You, Miss Granger, I thought you were very clear-headed. And you, Mr. Potter, I originally thought you were more interested in Gryffindor's honor. You will both be put in solitary confinement, and Gryffindor will be deducted 50 points. Her voice was calm, and she had obviously passed the most angry moment. As for Mr. Longbottom, no matter what happens, it is very dangerous to wander around the school in the middle of the night. The same goes for Mr. Grindelwald and Mr. Malfoy. She turned around and said, you 3 will also be detained. Quote. Sepulus and Draco looked at each other, and thought to themselves, forget it, just turn it off. It's not a big deal, it's just wiping the picture frame and packing things up. Hogwarts is very important to first-year students. For students, confinement will not be so severe a punishment. In the upper grades, it will be a bit harder. You will have to weed the school grounds or clear snow from the owl loft. You are not allowed to use magic. It is pure hard work. Draco was slightly dissatisfied, but he didn't make any rebuttal. Anyway, his goal was achieved. He saw the fire dragon and successfully deducted a lot of points from Gryffindor. He did a little work. It doesn't matter anymore. Anyway, Laboon and Gall can be used instead. 50. Harry looked stunned. He opened his mouth and tried to plead with Professor McGonagall. 50 points each, Professor McGonagall said coldly, without giving Harry the slightest chance to plead. Professor, please. You can't. Sepulus felt Draco's shoulders tense suddenly, and he grabbed Draco's wrist, saying to himself, buddy, don't laugh out loud. Draco coughed slightly and adjusted his facial expression. Maybe he was laughing in his heart. Gryffindor took away 150 points. Directly ranked first. You don't need to tell me what I can and cannot do, Potter. Professor McGonagall's selflessness was fully demonstrated at this moment. Okay, I'll take you back. Draco must have endured a lot of hardship. He managed to hold on until he reached the lounge and then laughed heartily. Did you hear that, Sepulus? 150. Sepulus coughed. I heard it, 150. I'm afraid the other Gryffindor students will be scared to death if they wake up tomorrow and see the college hourglass. Draco smiled with great satisfaction. It's because they were careless. They dared to put such letters in the library books and forgot to take them back. Sepulus tilted his head. You won't follow others to the library to keep an eye on them, right? Draco's expression stiffened for a moment. How can this be called stalking? He puffed up his face. I discovered a major safety hazard and took perfect precautions. Sepulus smiled softly, and Draco scratched Sepul's waist angrily. In the empty Slytherin common room in the early hours of the morning, 2 little guys who could usually be considered informal in their laughter and expressions of emotion and anger fell into a small ball and fell on the soft carpet of the Slytherin common room. It's the nature of children at this age. After everyone does something bad together, the relationship will quickly become closer. It was as if Serpilus had heard that Harry and Ron accidentally rescued Hermione from a troll on Halloween night. Serpilus didn't know the specific story, but he knew that the 3 of them were now a very close group. The 2 of them quarreled for a while, each lying flat on the carpet, too lazy to move. Anyway, no one would go downstairs at this time, so they could just lie down for a while. It's rare that I can be so bold and do things as I please. Draco said suddenly. Sepples turned his head and looked at Draco's side face, looking at the ceiling without saying a word. As the heir of Malfoy, I feel that my life is quite boring, Draco snorted. It's actually quite boring to follow the rules all the time. Sir Prius still didn't speak. The friends around me are like this too. Everyone follows the rules within a fixed frame. Occasionally, if someone does something out of line, everyone will advise each other. Draco didn't seem to want Serples to answer. He just wanted to speak out urgently. He just wanted to talk. Probably the night is the best time. The soft moonlight judges everyone, no better than some lives under the sun can only escape. The moonlight is gentle and can take care of a person's weakness and fragility. It can also take care of the deepest desire in a person's heart that he doesn't want to be discovered by the sun. The last time we ran away from Filch, it was me. Draco paused, as if thinking about how to say this. That was when I was happiest. Does it sound a bit exaggerated? Draco suddenly turned his head to look at Seppulus, looking a little nervous and shy. Don't laugh at me. And what Seppulus did was roll over, and he gave Draco a hug. The night's heart-to-heart talk brought the two people closer together quickly, and Draco began to get close to Serples unconsciously. Maybe he didn't realize it himself, but Serples could clearly feel that Draco was more willing to stick to him. And every time the Malfoy family sent a package, the first one began to be delivered to Serpris' hands. Did you two go behind our backs? Blaise was at the dining table, watching Draco finish the meal but not leaving. Instead, he was cutting fruit for Seppulus, and he finally couldn't help but ask. Huh? Seppulus raised his head blankly, then glanced at Draco. What did we do? We went to slay the dragon. Draco calmly replied to Blaise, then pushed the orange he cut in front of Seppulus. Eat it. Sepples said. Oh, dragged the plate in front of him and continued to eat. Blaise's brows were raised high. Draco's name comes from the Latin for Draco. Slay the dragon. Who to kill? Draco could tell with just one glance what his friend who had grown up with him was thinking, and he rolled his eyes implicitly. Close your imagination. Blaise just laughed. Confinement came to Serples and Draco on Wednesday. They received a note from Professor McGonagall, asking them to go to the hall to find Mr. Filch at 11 o'clock. I really don't want to see Filch, Draco groaned, leaning half of his body on Sir Prius. He's so annoying. Blaise's eyebrows almost flew into his hair again. He seemed to want to talk and laugh, but he did neither. Hold on. Serpulus pressed Draco's shoulders and helped him up. The most I can do is go and pack his things. It won't get worse. Then he walked out of the castle at 11:10 and set foot on the road to the Forbidden Forest. Draco looked at Serples with a complicated expression. Why don't you stop talking sometimes? Draco looked at Serples. You have the effect of reverse prophecy. Sir Prius looked embarrassed. Traveling with them were Harry, Hermione and Neville. The three of them had been having a very difficult time recently. Originally, Gryffindor's score was very high, on par with Slytherin, and there was great hope of winning the first place. However, due to the recklessness of the three of them, the gap of 150 points between them was now 150 points away from Hufflepuff. The scores are still far behind. When they saw Draco and Seppulus, their expressions were a little uncomfortable. Especially Harry, who looked a little apologetic, just glanced at Serples and looked away in panic. I won't say anything anymore. Serpris smiled bitterly. I'll think about it in my heart at most. You'd better not think about it, Draco told him, to avoid accidents. It's really a good mouth that opens up. They followed Filch through the dark field. The only light source was a dim small kerosene lamp in Filch's hand, which illuminated a small area of the surrounding road. Walking across the grass, they bypassed the Quidditch pitch and walked to a huge, somewhat dilapidated stone house further back. This stone house was stacked very strangely, that is, it looked shaky from every angle and almost fell over, but it did not fall down, but stood there firmly, and it seemed that it wanted to continue standing. Hagrid emerged from the stone house. This explains why the stone house is so huge. He strode towards them, followed by a big dog, carrying a huge crossbow and hanging on his shoulder. Dressed with a full quiver. I've been waiting for half an hour. You're late, Filch. Hagrid's voice was still loud, and then he looked at the children behind Filch. Oh, Harry, Hermione, Seppulus. I haven't seen you in a while. You seem to have grown a little taller. Draco's eyes immediately fell on Serple's face, as if he was accusing Serples of knowing such a guy again. Sepulus smiled at Draco and said hello to Hagrid. Long time no see, Mr. Hagrid. Filch's brows furrowed and his voice was cold. You shouldn't be so polite to them, Hagrid. After all, they are here to be punished. Okay. Hagrid seemed impatient to talk to Filch. He frowned. Your mission is completed. I will be responsible for them next. Filch sneered. Whatever, I'll come back at dawn. His uncomfortable gaze fell on several children. Come and collect their remains. I hope they can emerge from the Forbidden Forest head and tail. Hagrid frowned and stepped forward to stand between the children and Filch. Filch glanced at Hagrid again, then turned and walked towards the castle with his kerosene lamp. Staggeringly disappeared into the darkness. Hagrid relaxed a little, looked back at the children, and coughed. To be honest, I didn't expect to send you here. The Forbidden Forest is not a place where you first-year students should go. Then why did you send us here? After Filch left, Hermione's energy improved a little. She seemed to be quite familiar with Hagrid, and she asked questions more naturally. Maybe Dumbledore and I reported it, hoping that some people would come to help. Hagrid sighed. He led a few children to the edge of the Forbidden Forest, picked up a lamp on one side, and blew it into it. After taking a breath, the flames immediately jumped up and almost burned Hagrid's beard. Look over there, do you see that path? He pointed to a path that didn't quite look like a road. Did you see that shiny thing on the ground? It's silvery white. It's lonely. The blood of the horned beast. Draco was stunned for a moment, and his expression began to change. A unicorn in the Forbidden Forest was injured by something. It was seriously injured. This is the second time this week. I also found one dead last Wednesday. We have to find the injured one. Help it. Hagrid and several people explained. The thing that hurt the unicorn discovered us first. What should we do, Mr. Hagrid? Looking at Draco's face, Serples thought he was scared, so he went over and held Draco's hand. Then he raised his head and asked Hagrid. As long as you're with me or Fang, it'll be fine. Hagrid patted the big dog next to him. As long as we hurry up, everything will be fine. There are blood stains everywhere, and that unicorn has obviously been as it stumbles around. I think it's also looking for help. Draco's face looked even worse. He grabbed Fang's collar chain and said, We're with Fang. Hagrid shrugged casually. Okay, then you and Yaya will go together. No matter how reluctant they were, Hagrid was certain that they had no choice but to follow him into the Forbidden Forest. Serples and Draco were in a group, with the big dog named Fang. They divided into two groups and entered the Forbidden Forest. Originally, Hagrid planned to ask Harry or someone to join in so that the numbers of the two teams would be equal, but Draco was not happy for anyone to join, and his face was so sullen and ugly, but he succeeded in the end. No one was allowed to join them. When they reached a fork in the road, the two groups began to separate. Hagrid left a lantern for Sepals and the others, and then gave them another warning, telling them not to leave the path. If they found a unicorn, they would use their wand to shoot green sparks. If they encountered something threatening, they would use the wand to shoot red sparks. Both Sepulus and Draco nodded in agreement. After walking for a while, Draco and Serpulus stopped in unison. Stay here for a while, Sepulus said what Draco was thinking. It's no problem even if we can't find the unicorn, let's go back after a while. Life is much more important than this so-called confinement. Draco nodded and pulled Fang's collar. They thought well. They found a slightly more stable place and squatted down silently. Under the shadow of Fang, Surprius took the lead in pulling out the wand, and then drew a checkerboard on the ground, and Draco played tic-tac-toe together. You will indeed relax during the game. When Yaya fell to the ground with a crash, both Sepulus and Draco were startled, and they both jumped up in fright. Yaya fell to the ground and twitched, and white foam began to spurt out from near his mouth and nose. Surprius braved it and went to explore it, and tried to pull Yaya. As a result, Yaya's weight was really impressive, and Surprius couldn't pull him. Move. Sorry, Yaya, I'll leave it here for you. You're a little heavy. Sepulus pulled Draco. Let's go, let's run. But suddenly there was fog around. It was a blue-purple mist, which looked poisonous. It fell from the sky, because just now the two of them were squatting on the ground, which was lower than Yaya, who was standing upright. In addition, the dog's sense of smell something more vigorous than humans, so Yaya fell first. Now they stood up suddenly, and the two people covered their mouths and noses in panic. But then, a black figure rushed towards them. Draco froze completely. It was probably the first time he had encountered such a situation. He was so frightened that he couldn't move at all. Surprise was a little better, because during this time in Durmstrang, Wolf probably had the same speed and momentum when he rushed over. Durmstrang's magic attack is part of the attack, and the biceps on his arms are not a decoration. The first time he saw this formation, he was panicked for a long time and couldn't move his feet. Now it has been upgraded. During the duel, he was able to avoid Wolf with flying colors everywhere. But the black shadow came very quickly, very quickly. Draco froze on the spot, and all Sepulus could do was to rush out, hold Draco in his arms, roll on the spot, and rush forward. Draco only reacted when he fell to the ground and started to run forward. While running, he didn't forget to use his wand to start shooting red sparks into the sky. It can be seen that his IQ is very online, but he was just disturbed by the sudden movement. Terrified. But they still couldn't outrun the black shadow that was chasing behind them, until the black shadow suddenly increased its speed, knocked Sepulus, who was half a step behind Draco, through him, and quickly disappeared. The last sound that Sepulus heard after the world was spinning was Draco shouting his name in panic. When he opened his eyes again, Sepulus found himself lying in the hospital wing of Hogwarts. His limbs were as soft as noodles, and his body was in severe pain. He could not move his limbs. "Are you awake?" a voice sounded softly in Sepulus's ears. Sepulus's eyes widened. He moved his eyes to look at the source of the sound, only to see the back of his head wrapped in a large scarf. He wanted to speak, but he couldn't. He could only blink his eyes and thought to himself, "If I close my eyes now, will you think I'm dead?" Then he heard the soft and thin voice laughing, "Naughty." Sepulus was stunned. "I know what you are thinking," the soft and thin voice spoke again, "didn't you guess who I am?" Surprise rolled his eyes blankly, the adult version of Tom Riddle. The soft and thin voice laughed again. "Your adjectives are interesting, but I think it's very vivid for you to distinguish between me and the little one in your room." Sepulus was stunned, wondering how you knew everything. "Didn't you ask the German, among the options he gave you, which one do you think is more reasonable?" He really knew everything. Surprise was a little nervous. This feeling of being invisible in front of a person was really terrifying. He hesitated for a while and guessed that they were connected by blood. "Yes, that's right. There's only one difference. Our blood is connected and our souls are shared." The soft and thin voice was still laughing, "You or me." Sepulus was stunned, and for a while he couldn't think of anything else. After he calmed down, he said, "I'm not you." Suddenly, my throat hurt so much when I spoke, my voice was not loud, and I was hoarse. I don't know how long I had been lying there and how long I hadn't taken a sip of water before I could do this. "Why are you not me?" The soft and thin voice sounded again, "If it weren't for me to cut out the flesh and bones, you would not exist at all. How do you think the little one in your house came out? Your blood fell on the diary, you woke him up." Sepulus had a stiff face, his heart was in a mess, and he was too confused to speak. "You or me," the soft and thin voice said, "I know you can't hear this. I have always paid attention to you. When you didn't know it, I was there every day when you were in the orphanage. Follow you. I watched you calm down little by little, I watched you learn all kinds of things, I watched you make various efforts to find a good way out, I watched you grow up, and I watched you come to me step by step. You were really outstanding. I made a total of 7 babies back then. You were the most well-behaved and sensible one. You didn't cry or make trouble. That's why I sent you to the orphanage where I stayed to let you live. Live the life I lived back then. Do you know what happened to the other babies? 3 died, 1 was adopted by a family, and the other 2 are still suffering in the orphanage." Sepulus's lips trembled. "You just watch. Useless people shouldn't be seen." Tom Riddle's soft voice sounded, but it sent chills all over Surpris's body. "You all have the same starting point, I won't lie to you. They are useless and have no ability to come to me." Quote. Sepulus's lips trembled and he could not make a sound. "Are you afraid?" Tom Riddle suddenly asked. "Why am I not afraid?" Surpulus asked back, "I am only an 11-year-old child. Even if I grew up in an orphanage, I would at least be a slightly smart child. Now tell me that I was originally there are 6 brothers, and now I am the only one alive to come to the magic world and come to you, and these are all your good plans, why am I not afraid? He spoke a little more hastily and choked slightly, so the body sitting next to his bed moved, took a water glass from the bedside table, inserted a straw and handed it to Seppel's lips, calling Seppels took 2 sips. Seppulus looked at that figure, and it turned out to be Quirrell. He was so stiff that he looked even more frightened than Seppels, who was lying on the bed and couldn't move very much. You don't have to worry about him. Tom noticed Seppulus's mood and comforted him. He is a young man I met in Albania, but he is just a usable person. He suddenly smiled, and his voice sounded pleasant, but the words he said would only make Seppels purse his lips and say nothing. As long as greed still exists, there will be many people available. I have a question. Surprise was silent for a while, then spoke again. Who am I to you? You said you cut out the flesh and bones, could you possibly be my father? I already had a Dark Lord as my father, and I didn't really want a second one. That dad was kind to me and would still care about me. Although he still disliked me when he wrote me a reply, he would still ask me to eat more and wear more clothes. But you, I feel that if you get angry, you will talk to the nanny at the orphanage. Just like playing with me. Maybe he'll do something stupid like stab me twice and then cure me. Tom Riddle smiled again. Seppels felt his head hurt when he heard him laugh. I was only in my early 20s when I had the accident. I was still unwilling to ask me to be your father. Surprise was numb. Eve was made from the dust of the ground and Adam's rib. If you don't want to be my father, you can't expect me to be your wife. He had already begun to act like he was breaking a jar, and the thought in his mind was that if the worst happens, just kill him, forget it, and save me from suffering while alive. Then Tom Riddle laughed again. You are an interesting person, but you are only 11 years old, and I am not a pervert. Let me allow you to call me brother. Anyway, you and Diggory are good friends, isn't it because you want a brother, but that's it for Gory. Don't worry about the 2 Weasleys, they are filthy blood traitors who don't deserve more attention. Seppels was silent for a while and said, Oh. It's not convenient for me to stay here for too long. That old guy Dumbledore is paying close attention to you. I can only spare some time to see you in the evening. I guess he should come to see you later. You should know what to say and what not to say, right? I'm just an 11-year-old student, Seppels repeated again. Mr. Dumbledore is a well-known wizard. Are you expecting too much from me if you expect me to fool him? Tom also said, Oh, you don't have to worry about this. He knows that you are related to me, and his legitimacy is not effective on you. Just tell him that you always dream that you are there. If someone else does something in their body, he will definitely make arrangements for it. Okay, you two are plotting against each other and using me as a chessboard here, right? Seppulus just wants to faint again and escape reality. But he failed to faint. He just lay on the bed, looking at Quirrell's body, which contained an unknown percentage of the adult version of Riddle, and then he continued to lie on the bed, looking at the white ceiling of the hospital wing. I thought to myself why I wasn't dizzy yet. He was so bored that he began to memorize potion ingredients in his mind to pass the time. Finally, the door to the hospital wing opened, but it was not Dumbledore who entered the door that Seppels had been waiting for, but Draco. He tiptoed open the door, and came to Seppels' hospital bed with ease and familiarity. Then he looked at Seppulus silently for a few seconds, and he took a step back. You're awake. Surprise wanted to nod, but it hurt a little when his head moved, and then he opened his mouth. Wake up. Draco hesitated for a long time before approaching, then touched Seppel's forehead with his hand, and then pinched Seppel's face, and then let go after hearing him mumble the word, pain. He sat beside Seppel's bed. Are you thirsty? Do you want to drink some water, or eat something? He was silent for a long time, and then he sighed. I was terrified, Seppels. I thought you were going to die. His voice was so low that Seppels began to feel a little distressed for no reason. Am I not dead? He still feels uncomfortable now. The sip of water that Riddle handed over just now can't do much, and now he still feels like there is some movement of a blade in his throat when he opens his mouth. But I thought you were dead. Draco's voice was low but stubborn. You just fell down because you were protecting me who was scared to death, and because you were behind me. There was a hint of crying in his voice. No matter how I called you, you didn't respond, you didn't move, and you stopped talking to me. Hagrid and the others sent you back, and the Godfather gave you a lot of magic potions, and then even the principal came. You were in a coma for a week. Maybe Draco was really crying. He turned his head and turned his back to Sepples, not even wanting to show his face to Sepples. Sepples was lying on the bed pitifully, his eyes rolling. It almost hurts. The one lying here should have been mine. I was too frightened and didn't know how to run, which is why you suffered. Seppulus was stunned. What Draco said was not wrong. Sepples indeed missed the best time to escape because he called Draco. But this shouldn't be entirely Draco's fault. He, Sepples, is not a completely heartless person. Even if he spared his life, under the circumstances, he couldn't just watch his friend die directly. God. If you feel really guilty, Surprise said hoarsely, can you get me some hot water to drink? My throat hurts a little. Draco was startled, and quickly took the water glass from the bedside to get water for Surples. The straw when Riddle handed the water just now was still in it, and Surples took a few sips of water through the straw. Then his neck softened and he fell back on the bed. Looking at it this way, Riddle might still be able to take care of people. Surples thought blankly for a moment. Riddle knew how to hold his neck when feeding him water. But after a pause, he was astonished as to why he had such an idea. Now that I'm awake, should I call a professor or a doctor? Surpulus regained his strength and asked Draco, I fainted for a week, what happened in the meantime? Draco paused. I can't call anyone over for the time being. I sneaked out at night. If I go find someone, I may not be able to avoid being scolded. Ever since you had an accident in the Forbidden Forest, Dumbledore was impeached by the school board and the Ministry of Magic, and was also scolded by his father and asked not to run around casually. Quote. Ah, this is understandable. After all, Draco is the only young master of the Malfoy family, and he is really precious. That's okay, I'll just lie down and sleep for a while. Surpulus tried hard to show that it didn't matter. I guess the professor will come during the day tomorrow, so I'll just lie down for a while. Draco said, I'll come see you tomorrow at dawn. If there's anything you want to eat, I'll bring it to you. Surprise looked at Draco's still gloomy little face and thought to himself, I've just been in coma for a few days. I'm afraid I won't be able to take a few bites of the delicious food you brought. But looking at Draco's face, he was. I didn't intend to provoke him. After all, Draco looked really guilty. Then, Surprise thought hard for a while, let's have apple cheese. I thought it was quite delicious last time I ate it. That shop in Diagon Alley. Draco's eyes indeed brightened a little more because of Surprise's words. Yes, that's it. Their pear cake is also quite delicious. Surprise moved his chin and took it as a nod. Draco nodded, then got down from Surple's bed and walked to the door. Then he turned back and shook Surple's hand. I will come to see you at dawn tomorrow, and then at noon I'll bring you something to eat after class, and I'll come over in the evening to tell you about what happened recently, just wait for me. Surprise responded. Go back quickly, be careful on the road, don't let Filch catch you. Draco then turned around and left. Sepple spread out on the bed again and looked up at the ceiling. What day is this? He has been lying here for a week, and Natasha and Tom in the room are still anxious to death. When can he be discharged from the hospital and return to his dormitory? And that Riddle, I don't want to recognize you. I admit that I was too hasty to regard you as my idol before. You are so nervous. I always feel that there is something wrong with you. I feel that I am not like you. It's easy to die if we stay together. He was filled with sorrow, and just as he was thinking about why he was so troubled and unlucky, the door of the medical wing opened again. But this time it was Dumbledore and Professor Snape who came in. Professor Snape came over and saw Surples with his eyes open. He was stunned for a moment. Then he turned around and took out a jar from Surples' bedside table. He took out something from it and lifted it up. Surpulus's chin was stuffed into Surpulus' mouth. Seppulus blinked in confusion. Slices of the root of the dragon's tongue to relieve pain. Professor Snape said coldly. Surprise blinked again, this time to express his gratitude. Although my mouth was very bitter, my body did feel better. At least my arms and legs no longer looked like noodles and I could move around a little. Dumbledore looked at the exchange between Surples and Professor Snape and smiled. You two have a good relationship. Professor Snape didn't answer, just crossed his arms and stood back. Dumbledore smiled and sat beside Serpil's bed. His eyes fell on the water glass beside the bed. It seems that someone still cares about you, Serpils. Sir Prius blinked again, this time pretending to be stupid. But pretending to be stupid, the two people in front of him are not stupid, so Sepulus looked innocent. Can I not pursue it, sir? He still had the tail of the dragon's tongue in his mouth, and his voice was more or less vague. He is also worried about me. Dumbledore had no intention of pursuing the matter. He simply asked Sepulus a few questions, asking him if he remembered what he saw in the Forbidden Forest, how he was attacked, and how he felt after the attack. Sir Prius gave a general idea based on his memory. He knew that Dumbledore must have asked Draco before. After such a big thing happened, they would not just wait for him to wake up before asking for news. As expected, Dumbledore asked no more questions after asking once. He just paused, and when he spoke again, he repeated a question he had asked before in his office. Is there anything else you want to tell me? When he asked this question at the beginning, Sepulus didn't understand what he meant. Now after these twists and turns, he finally got a taste of it. Dumbledore must have known for a long time that he had an inextricable relationship between Serpils and Riddle. The question he asked himself was to test whether Riddle had come to him. What was more likely was that he was testing Serpils. Isn't Price loyal? It can be said that what Dumbledore wanted was to know whether the child he brought back had lied to him. Sepils didn't know how much Dumbledore knew about Riddle. He was the unlucky one, entangled between two smart people, confused and pushed to the front. He was silent for a while and then spoke according to Riddle's wishes. I always dream about doing something in other people's bodies, he said slowly, remembering the time after Halloween, and roughly described it to Dumbledore based on his feelings, maybe nightmare, but very real. He spoke slowly, without even looking at Dumbledore's expression, but just talking to himself. Natasha sometimes slaps me with her tail when she sees that I am not sleeping peacefully, and I can't wake up. Dumbledore was indeed not surprised by this description of Serpils. Perhaps he had already known that Serpils would be in this situation, and he just asked in more detail. For example, what did Serpils dream about? How you feel, your position, and whether you know whose body you were on when you were there. Sir Prius answered the questions he knew, and those who couldn't answer or didn't dare to answer said he didn't know and couldn't remember. Dumbledore didn't make things difficult for him. The magical world is so magical. Dumbledore smiled and did not give any further explanation. In the days to come, you can learn occlumency from Severus. Severus was stunned for a moment and thought to himself, who is Severus? I heard Professor Snape on the side sneer, I am not your nanny, Dumbledore. Ah, it turns out that Severus is Mr. Snape's Christian name. Severus' doubts were answered, but his eyes widened in an instant. No, Professor, it doesn't matter if you speak so rudely to your boss. Yes, will he deduct your bonus? Dumbledore didn't mean to be offended at all, and still smiled at Professor Snape. You will do well, Severus, I believe in you. The corners of Professor Snape's eyes twitched, and the corners of Serpilus's eyes twitched as well. Is this a CPU? You don't even want to make a fool of your employees, Principal. Go to my office at 5 o'clock every day. But in the end Professor Snape agreed, even though his face looked disgusting. Sepulus nodded sarcastically. Hey, I can nod my head and move my arms and legs. Pay attention to your health. Dumbledore saw what Sepulus was doing when he wanted to get up, and pushed him back down with great precision. You are indeed seriously injured. You should rest more. He said a few more caring words and left with Professor Snape. Before leaving, he didn't forget to look back and wink. If there are friends who come to see you secretly in the future, remember to ask them to restore things to their original positions before leaving, so as not to be seen. Dumbledore, Professor Snape said with a dark face. Sepulus glanced at the ceiling guiltily. Then they walked away. After they left, the ward fell into complete silence again. He was the only one lying here, and he was really lifeless. He closed his eyes and tried to sleep for a while, but he probably slept for too long recently. He lay down and closed his eyes for a long time without feeling sleepy. Finally, he opened his eyes angrily, struggled hard for a long time, and sat up. It was difficult to fall asleep after sitting up now. He propped himself up and held the wall to get out of bed and walked around the room in the hospital wing. Although his body still hurt badly, and when he first got out of bed, he had been lying on his legs for a week. I was not very energetic and even fell down, but after walking for a while holding on to the wall, I felt okay. Thanks to Wolf, who is far away in Germany. If he hadn't been urging him to exercise again and again, he might have been injured more seriously in the Forbidden Forest, and he would have to lie down for a longer time now. I've been in a coma for a week, and I probably didn't go to Wolf's place to sign in this week. Serples leaned on the balcony and looked at the dark sky outside, still sighing in his heart. He is really just an 11-year-old child. Really, he can't stand so much training. He is very pitiful. There was no one in the room, not even a book. Serples was so bored that he could only pass the time by looking at the human anatomy diagrams posted on the wall. The bell tower struck 5 times outside, and Sepulus realized that it was actually dawn. He estimated that someone would come to the hospital wing soon, so he moved back to the bed and lay down again. In the end, he didn't lie down for much. Minutes later, the door rang. Serples thought it was the teacher from the hospital wing who had arrived, so he stood up and was about to call someone obediently, when he saw Wolf wearing a Durmstrang school uniform coming. Serpres was a little dumbfounded, and raised his hand to wipe his face. After taking another look, he realized that he had seen it right, it was really Wolf. Sepulus watched Wolf walk from the door to him. He took off his cloak and folded it and put it on the bedside. He didn't even organize his words, "Why are you here?" In the end, he could only ask this question dryly. "In fact, I probably have a lot of questions I want to ask. For example, do you have no classes today? Are you going to come to Durmstrang and let Hogwarts go again? And why didn't you tell me in advance that you were coming? I finally came to my school while I was still in bed. I even boasted to you before about how beautiful my school is. I will definitely take you around when you come." But Wolf just lowered his gaze and circled around Sepulus. Sepulus started to get hairy when he looked at him. When he was thinking about saying something to lighten the atmosphere, Wolf the husband suddenly raised his hand and touched Serpres' cheek. Lost weight. Serpres was stunned at the moment, blinking for a long time before he said in a panic, I heard that I have been unconscious for a week and haven't eaten anything for a week. Isn't it necessary to lose weight? Ha 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 ha. Quote. Wolf just looked at him solemnly, took back his hand after a while, and said, but there was nothing more to say. Sitting on the bed, Sepulus was sitting on pins and needles. He opened his mouth and held it in for a while before he said, "You won't have class today." "I've asked for leave." Wolf's expression was still calm, but he actually took out an apple from nowhere, and then started peeling it with the dagger he carried on his waist under Serpulus' increasingly horrified gaze. "I come to see you every morning during morning classes." Serpulus really wanted to jump out of bed now. What virtue could he have? The heir of the Wolf family skipped early classes just to watch him. He trembled, "You come here every day?" Been here for a week." Serpulus' eyes darkened. "I can't be killed by that father of yours, right? Because I caused his son to skip school. That father of yours doesn't have a good reputation." Perhaps it was because Serpulus' expression was so wonderful that Wolf comforted him when he put the apple on the tip of the knife and handed it to Serpulus' mouth. "It's okay." "Are you okay? Are you really okay?" Serpres opened his mouth and took a bite of the apple. He really wanted to cry. Fortunately, Wolf didn't make any more frightening remarks in the following time. He really came to take a look. When Serpulus woke up, he peeled an apple and fed it to him. After feeding, he glanced at the watch on his wrist, left a message, "Come back tomorrow," washed his hands, put on his cloak and left. Sepulus, my dear brother, you are quite scary, do you know that? Serpres didn't recover after watching Wolf leave. He was still in a daze when he took a tissue from the table and wiped his hands. He was confused when Draco came in again, holding something in his hand. "Draco." Serpulus looked up blankly. "Why are you here at this time?" Draco has never been one to get up early. Usually it was Serpulus who woke him up, but why did he get up so early today? "I came to see you." Draco lowered his eyes and handed the thing in his hand to Sepulus. The toy looked very familiar. It was the egg custard that Sepulus usually used for breakfast before going to class. "I asked Pansy, and she said she was just too sick to eat, so I brought custard over." Perhaps he was afraid that Serpulus would be worried, so he continued to add, Pansy has many younger brothers and sisters at home, so she is very good at taking care of others. Draco came over with this egg custard. Serpils guessed Draco's route of action when he got up today. Either Draco went to the auditorium and brought back this custard, or Draco went to the kitchen. Then I brought custard over. No matter which one it was, Draco must have gotten up very early today. You don't have to get up so early. Serpils felt a little distressed. Wow, didn't he ask Draco to get up every day just to make Draco stay in bed? Now Draco gets up early for him. Doesn't this mean that all his previous hard work has been in vain? He felt sorry for his efforts. Draco didn't think there was any problem. When Sepulus asked him, he just said he was used to it. After a long pause, he finally spoke, Do you have a good relationship with that wolf family? Sepulus was stunned for a moment, and after thinking that it was indeed the time when Wolf left and Draco came over, the two of them might have met each other, he nodded. He looked after me very well when I was in Durmstrang. Draco paused after hearing this, seeming a little wilted. Sepulus was a little confused, not knowing what he said that offended Master Malfoy's fragile heart. He could only reach out and tug at Draco's sleeve. What's the matter? It's okay. Draco suddenly felt excited again. I just saw him when I came here recently. You have breakfast first, and I'll come see you after class at noon. He handed the egg custard to Serpils, then gave Serpils a hug, turned around and ran away. Serpris was holding the egg custard, feeling a little confused. I was just slightly injured and I lay down for a while. Why do I feel like the world has changed? Draco came at noon and brought a bunch of things similar to supplements to Sepulus. The basic situation became, This is delicious, Sepils, you eat it, that one is delicious, Sepils. Les, you drink it, that's good for your health, take a look. Cedric also came in the afternoon, also bringing condolences, but what he brought was not food, but he was worried that Serpils would have to stay in the hospital wing for a while, and that he would be bored, brought a book to Serpils. Serpils was quite moved and got up from the bed and gave Cedric a hug. Then Cedric pulled him off his body and carefully stuffed him into the quilt. Cedric's books were truly life-saving. Although Cedric might have coaxed him like a child and brought him fairy tales from the wizarding world, they also made Surprius read them with gusto and turned them over and over again. Draco came over again in the evening, and this time he brought more food to Serpils, filling up all of Serpils' small bedside table, and the pile of fruits. Serpils have never seen Pulus on weekdays, and he obviously spent a lot of gold galleons. A little later, Theodore came again. What he brought to Serpils were the course notes of the last week. Serpils looked at the course notes and said to himself that Theodore should have been assigned at first. Ravenclaw is right. I feel like my place has become some kind of tourist attraction. Sepulus bit into the fruit that Draco brought, holding the notes that Theodore just brought in his hand. The book that Cedric brought is now in the Theodore was looking at it in his hands. Does everyone want to come here to check in or what? This shows that you are a nice person and everyone is worried about you. Theodore calmly turned the page. As far as I know, Potter and Granger also planned to come see you, but they never found the opportunity. Quote. Sepulus blinked and fell into confusion again. Why didn't they find the opportunity? Is the ward a place that is inaccessible? After what happened to you in the Forbidden Forest, Draco put all the fire on Potter. He thought that if Potter and the others hadn't been bold enough to bring out a fire dragon, then these things wouldn't have happened. Theodore said. Serpils explained, Potter has been having a hard time recently. On the one hand, he has deducted a lot of points from Gryffindor, and this house already dislikes him. On the other hand, he has completely offended Draco. Draco always gave him trouble. Sepulus smiled. You should have a good rest recently. The first-year classes are not difficult. You can definitely keep up by reading your notes. Theodore shrugged. Is there anything you want in your dormitory? I can bring it to you. Come over. So considerate. Surprius covered his heart and made a touching gesture, thinking that Theodore was still reliable. You don't need to bring the things out. Surprius hesitated, thinking that it would be better not to bring out the diary where Tom lives, so as not to cause more trouble, and Natasha is sleepy in the winter and has to hibernate, so as not to cause trouble. Please you go to my house and tell Natasha through the cage that everything is fine. I'm just injured and I need to rest outside for a while, just speak louder. Your snake. Theodore was a little hesitant and confused. Do you understand? In fact, it's not meant for Natasha. If you speak louder, Tom will hear it. If Tom hears it, Tom will explain it to Natasha, but Sepals can't tell Theodore frankly that Tom existence. I can only insist that Natasha is very smart and understands human speech. Theodore was confused, but Theodore did as he was told. Serpals stayed in the hospital wing for another week, receiving visits from all kinds of people. In the morning, Wolf would come and sometimes meet Draco. This time was the most difficult, because Sir Prius always felt that the atmosphere between the two of them was very strange. If I had to say it, it might be a competition for favor, feeling. Ah, what a sin it is to describe them both that way. But with the weird atmosphere of the two of them, it was not difficult for Professor Snape to teach occlumency at night. Draco usually comes at noon, and sometimes Draco will bring several Slytherin friends with him. Cedric usually comes in the afternoon and evening. Thanks to Cedric, Serpals hasn't even read a few Muggle fairy tales, but now he has read almost all fairy tales from the wizarding world. Later, Theodore usually comes, and after Theodore leaves, Professor Snape usually comes. One day when I was unlucky, I could be woken up by Riddle in the middle of the night and chat with him. Although it was basically Riddle who was talking, Serpals was listening numbly while holding his legs on the bed. However, Riddle was not completely useless. He actually taught Sepals how to better master occlumency, making Professor Snape's teaching even more effective. I hope you learn well. Riddle seemed a little helpless. If you learn well, I won't hear what you are thinking all the time. You look calm, but the witty words in your mind are not. I'm young, but I'm also very courageous, and I can arrange all kinds of things for me. Sepals' face trembled, pretending to be dead and pretending he didn't know. After a week of such troubles, Sepulus finally got Mr. Snape's evaluation, saying that he was almost doing well, and he was discharged from the hospital. The first thing Surprise did when he left the door of the hospital wing was to run down the stairs out of the castle and ran to the grass until he couldn't run anymore and lay down on the grass. He was really going crazy. After he got up from the ground and got up, he turned around and went back to the dormitory. He didn't go back for half a month. I wonder if Tom in the room was anxious. He ran back to the dormitory, and as soon as he locked the door, Tom was already beside him. Tom looked up and down, left and right, looking at Sir Prius, folding his arms and floating behind him. Do you know you're back? Sepulus paused, and instantly he felt guilty. Ha 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 ha, isn't this an accident? I asked Theodore to pass the message. It's okay not to mention this. When it came to mentioning this, Tom rolled his eyes at Sepulus regardless of his image. When your friend came over, I thought it was you and almost showed up to him. Tom snorted, but he was serious and said it to Natasha in a straight tone. He said it several times, and Natasha came out of the nest with a confused look on her face before he left. Quote. Sepulus even smiled and glanced wildly. Fortunately, Tom was not an unreasonable person. Seeing the sincerity of Serpal's apology, he snorted again and asked him if there was nothing wrong with his body now. No problem, no problem. Surprise nodded and began to tell Tom how this happened, and also told the adult version of Tom. Tom's brows gradually furrowed as he listened. Am I going to become such a lunatic in the future? See, it wasn't that Serpulus felt something was wrong, it was that Riddle himself was a little bit crazy. Perhaps something happened to you while you were studying at Hogwarts, Serpal said to comfort Tom. He is crazy and you are not. Tom glanced at Sepals with a complicated mood and said thank you, but he was not comforted. The timing of Serpals being discharged from the hospital was not very clever. The Quidditch game that was worth watching was over. Christmas was coming in a few days. Draco sincerely invited Serpals to stay at Malfoy Manor, but Theodore obviously also has this idea. In order not to treat others favorably and to show his filial piety, Sepulus decided to return to Nurmengard to be with his cheap father Grindelwald. There's nothing wrong with this. Draco and Theodore have no reason to fight even if they want to. But before Serpals could board the Hogwarts Express, Harry, Hermione, and Ron approached him. Sepulus, Hermione appeared first, and then blocked Sepals between two rows of bookshelves in the library. We have something to talk to you about. Sepals was stunned for a moment, holding the book in his hand in confusion. Huh. He was truly at a loss. Seeing the three Gryffindors squeezed into the bookshelf, Sir Prius looked at him confused. What's wrong? Serpilus asked after wondering for a while. We have something to tell you. Harry squeezed in front of Hermione. Well, first of all, I want to say sorry to you, Sepils. A huge question mark rose above Serpil's head. What? Harry was extremely sincere. He grabbed Sepulus's hand and apologized sincerely, which even frightened Sepils. After asking a few more questions, he found out that it was also because of Serpil's injury. Harry felt that the reason why Serpils was injured was because of him. If he hadn't created Noble the Fire Dragon, Serpils would not go out at night, and was punished with confinement in the Forbidden Forest. As a result, he was injured and lay in the medical wing for half a month. I didn't lie. Harry seemed a little aggrieved. I didn't make up lies and lie about the fire dragon. There really was a fire dragon. It was just that the fire dragon had already been sent away when Malfoy went there. He even raised his hand and pointed at Ron. His brother Charlie came to pick it up. The letter was Charlie's reply. Ron accidentally left it in the library. It probably wasn't Sepulus's illusion. Sepils rolled his eyes when he saw Ron. Ron, you are noble, and you trick people into making me a clown. Serpils really didn't blame Harry for his injury. He felt a little embarrassed when he heard Harry apologize so sincerely, and immediately said that it was nothing. I forgive you, I forgive you. Seeing Harry's eyes light up, Sepulus was sure that Ron really rolled his eyes this time. Hermione might be too, but the next moment, Hermione squeezed to the front. Her expression was much more serious. She told Serpils that they had discovered something big. What's the big deal? Sepulus was still confused. Let's talk about Halloween first, Hermione said clearly. On Halloween we met Professor Snape. He broke into the forbidden area on the 4th floor and was even bitten by Fluffy. He must have some evil plans for the Sorcerer's Stone. Quote. Sepulus was even more confused. What is this? What is Lu Wei and what is the Magic Stone? Can you say something that I can understand? Maybe it was because the blank look in his eyes was too obvious. Hermione coughed awkwardly, and then asked Surprise if there was something she didn't understand. Surprise was full of depression. I didn't understand a word he said. What follows is a lengthy explanation. The theft of Gringotts that Serpils saw in the newspaper a long time ago was mentioned again. Harry told Serpils that the two of them went to Diagon Alley together. At that time, Serpils had made arrangements in advance, waiting for him at Ollivander's wand shop, so Serpils left first. As for Harry and Hagrid, their first stop was Gringotts. They went to Harry's parents' vault. At the same time, Hagrid helped Principal Dumbledore do something there and took something from one of the vaults. It's Vault 713, Harry said seriously. I remember it very clearly because we were riding its rail car in Gringotts and I almost threw up. He said it seriously, with a sad look on his face. Apparently he suffered a serious crime while at Gringotts. Then why is it said to be the Philosopher's Stone? Sepulus raised an eyebrow and asked, I don't think the package will clearly say what's inside. The three Gryffindors looked at each other, and then Harry scratched his hair a little embarrassed. Actually, it was Hagrid who let it slip, including the matter about Lu Wei. He let it slip. Serpilus didn't ask this time, he just raised an eyebrow and waited for them to explain to him who Lu Wei was. We made an appointment in the prize showroom, but Filch came to find him, and we ran away. Hermione took over. We later ran to the restricted area on the 4th floor, and we saw a 3-headed bird inside. Dog, that 3-headed dog is Lu Wei. Sepulus's heart skipped a beat, and his brows raised even higher. Wow, you guys haven't been idle either. You've done a lot of things during this period. We saw a trapdoor under Lu Wei, and we thought the Philosopher's Stone must be hidden under that trapdoor. Harry said. And Snape was going to steal it, Ron added. Sepil's eyebrows that had just been lowered were raised again. It's true, Ron may have seen the playful disbelief on Sepulus's expression. During Halloween, we saw it in the corridor. Snape let the troll into the school, and then he went alone. He stole something and was bitten by Lu Wei. All three of us saw it. As he spoke, he turned to look at Harry and Hermione nodded, confirming Ron's words. Surprise blinked and remembered when it was. That night he trapped himself in bed, and then dreamed that he was on Quirrell's body, and Quirrell hurriedly rushed to the 4 sides. The restricted area of the building. Then, what's the use of the Philosopher's Stone? Professor Snape wants to steal it. Serpils paused and asked. The Philosopher's Stone can resurrect people, Ron said without thinking. It's very useful. Who wouldn't want it? Sepples said. Wow, look what you said. Since everyone wants it, why does it have to be Professor Snape? Maybe someone wants to steal the Sorcerer's Stone, and then be killed by Snape. Maybe the professor stopped me. He knew that what he said should be the true situation that day. After all, he now knew that Riddle was in Quirrell, and if the Sorcerer's Stone really had the effect of resurrecting people, then Riddle must be the one he wanted most. No one. Surprise didn't know what form Riddle was on Quirrell's body now, but he knew it shouldn't be a good appearance, otherwise Riddle wouldn't have seen him several times at night but never showed his true appearance. Instead, only the voice was talking to him. Ron was choked by Seppulus' words. He pointed at Sepples for a long time but didn't say anything. I know that Professor Snape is your dean, and you don't want to speak ill of him. Hermione, a relatively calm little witch, pushed her hair back, but I have another thing to do. It proves that Professor Snape is not a good person. After Hermione said this, Ron immediately became energetic. It was obvious that he also knew what Hermione wanted to say, and felt that what Hermione said would definitely stop Sir Prius' mouth. Sir Prius said, although he still didn't take it seriously, but he also motioned to Hermione to talk about it. You were in the hospital wing a few days ago, so you may not know that Harry had some accidents during the Quidditch match and almost fell off his broomstick at high altitude. Surples was a little confused again. Harry is participating in the Quidditch game. I remember you can only apply to join the Quidditch team in your second year. He raised his eyes to look at Harry in confusion, and Harry pursed his lips and smiled, scratching his hair a little embarrassed. Thank you to Malfoy. Ron's voice sounded again. It seemed that Harry was happier to be in the team than he was to be in the team. If Malfoy hadn't thrown Neville's memory ball around, Harry would not ride a broomstick to pick up balls, nor would he be favored by Professor McGonagall and join the Gryffindor Quidditch team within 1 year. Harry smiled shyly. The corner of Seppulus's mouth twitched slightly. You'd better not say this in front of Draco. If he goes crazy because of this, I can't stop him. Ron smiled even more proudly. So Harry showed up during the Quidditch match. No, there was an almost accident, but what does this have to do with Professor Snape? Surples tapped the table with his finger and asked. Since Ron had already solved the previous problem, Hermione continued with his explanation, because Professor Snape is hexing Harry. Sir Prius's eyebrows flew up again. Why? Because Snape hates Harry, Ron said again anxiously. He targets Harry everywhere, don't you see? Seppulus was stunned for a moment, thinking that he could see it, but it shouldn't be enough to cast a curse on Harry, right? I know you may not believe it. Hermione took out a piece of cloth from her bag and handed it to Surprise as his expression gradually became weird. This is Professor Snape's piece that I burned at that time. At the hem of his robe, I saw Professor Snape casting a curse on Harry. You know the conditions that must be met to cast a curse, right? Ah, do you have to watch the person being cursed? Surples paused. Hermione nodded. Yes, so when I found Professor Snape staring at Harry and chanting curses constantly, I walked along the lower wooden steps of the Quidditch viewing platform to the Slytherin viewing platform. Below the stage, Professor Snape's robes were burned. After he stopped looking at Harry because of this, Harry's broom returned to normal. She spoke seriously and conclusively, and she even gave Professor Snape's robe Kakuzu to Sepples, which made Sepples a little confused. Although he was sure that Professor Snape on Halloween was not thinking about the Philosopher's Stone, was it possible that Professor Snape really had any deep grudge against Harry? Surples looked Harry up and down and felt that it shouldn't be the case. Harry was only an 11-year-old child, and he hadn't even lived in the wizarding world for the past 11 years. Even if he had any grudges, he should be with Harry. It's only right to have a grudge against your parents. Who is Harry's father? I'll check the alumni list another day. Surples' thoughts wandered away again. So why did you come to me? After hearing the story, Surpulus was still confused. What do you want me to do? The Gryffindor trio began to look at each other again. This time after looking at each other for a while, Harry spoke. We may need your help to expose Snape's conspiracy. Seppulus, what you are saying is all human language, but why can't I understand it? Reveal the conspiracy. Seppulus repeated in a murmur. Snape will steal the Sorcerer's Stone sooner or later, Hermione said. We need you, Sepples. You are the most powerful among the first years. We need your help. Although I was praised, I was not very happy. Cepulus pressed his forehead. Let's look at it again. He gave a very vague answer. If I happened to be at school at that time, I would provide you with a little help, but you also know that I usually go to Durmstrang on weekends. Maybe you won't find me at all then, right? Sir Prius decided to go to Durmstrang through the fireplace after class. He is not the chosen one, nor does he have the aura of a protagonist. He just wants to live a good and smooth life, so staying away from danger is the best way to save his life. The Gryffindor trio looked a little disappointed, but they were also measured and did not force Serpils to agree. To be honest, if they were really willful and said that Serpils must do whatever he wanted, Cepils will definitely fall out with them. But Harry was very serious. He told Serpils that he would go to Serpils if necessary. Sir Prius said goodbye and thank you, turned around, and ran off to Durmstrang. Wolf had classes at this time and was not in the dormitory, and Serpils had already fallen asleep on the sofa. When he woke up again, he was lying on Wolf's bed, and his clothes had been changed into pajamas. How could I sleep so well? Serpils sat up and calmed down for a while, then lifted the quilt and jumped to the ground. Put on socks. Wolf sat in front of the desk without looking back. Sir Prius lowered his head to look at his toes that were stuck in the carpet, and pursed his lips. Is it okay? It's not cold. After all, the carpet was so thick and the fireplace in the room was so warm that it didn't matter whether I wore socks or not. He ran over to Wolf's desk with bare feet, and first covered his face. Is it reading? Isn't it some letter from home? Do you want me to avoid it? Even if it's a letter from home, you don't need to avoid it. Wolf turned his face to see whether Serpils had come over without socks. He sighed, stood up, and passed through Serpils with both hands. Under the armpit, he directly lifted the person up, held him in his arms after shaking it, and threw the person back on the bed. Cepulus blinked innocently. Wolf handed the wool socks placed at the end of the bed to Serpils. Do you want me to wear these for you too? Cepulus pursed his lips again. I'll just wear it. I just thought that the carpet on the floor is so thick that it doesn't matter if I don't wear it. Under Wolf's gaze, Cepils put on his socks obediently, and then raised his legs to show Wolf that he had put on his socks obediently. Why are you here at this time? Wolf asked Serpils when he saw that Serpils was wearing socks honestly. Sir Prius always comes to his place on weekends. Today, Wednesday, when he came back from class and saw Sir Prius sleeping in a small ball like a cat on his sofa, he was startled, thinking that something had happened. Woolen cloth. When I looked over, I found that the person was simply sleeping peacefully, so I put him on the bed, changed into pajamas, and let him sleep. I just missed you and came to see you. Cepulus rolled his eyes with eyes dripping and a cute smile on his face. Hogwarts is not stable recently, so I came to your place to hide. Quote. Wolf didn't care why Serpils came, he just came and stayed. There were very few students in Durmstrang, and his student dormitory was also very big. His bed was the only one. There is enough room to sleep 3 adults, and it is definitely enough for Serpils to live here. When I went to Hogwarts, Mr. Dumbledore told me that Hogwarts was the safest place. I really didn't think Hogwarts was that safe, Cepulus said. Seaside, there's been a lot of commotion lately. It seems that Mr. Dumbledore has misplaced some of his treasures and someone is trying to steal it. Wolf looked at Cepulus for a while. Want to stay permanently? I guess I can't live there permanently. Cepulus sighed aggrievedly. If I'm not at school all the time, it's hard to take classes there. I haven't been to class for half a month. I have final exams. I still don't know how I will do in the exam. Mr. Grindelwald said that if I don't get first place in the exam, he will break my legs when I go back. Then we won't go back. Wolf nodded calmly. I will buy you a village in Germany, and you can live there. After saying this calmly, Cepulus' expression became a little broken. Sometimes I really feel that I am out of tune with you because you are too rich. That's not necessary. Cepulus hurriedly waved his hand and refused. It's not too difficult to be the first at this age. I just go back and read a book, but I may have to run to you at night from now on to avoid being caught. Caught to join in the fun? That's a little bit dangerous. Wolf said. Cepulus felt relieved after getting the promise. He felt that Wolf was very indulgent towards him. Although he didn't know the reason for this indulgence, it did not prevent him from carefully testing the bottom line, then going along with it, and even gradually began to be arrogant. But Wolf was indeed a man of few words and a very informal person. He was worried that he would offend Wolf by rashly saying that he wanted to stay longer. So as soon as get out of class was over, dinner was over, he said goodbye to Draco Theodore and the others, and then said goodbye to Tom. After returning to the dormitory, he went to Wolf's dormitory. As long as I run away, danger and trouble cannot catch up with me. He hid very effectively. Later one morning when he went back to get his books to go to class, Tom told him that Harry Potter came to see him in the evening. He hurriedly didn't know how he got in, but he couldn't find him. He left in a hurry again. Surprise was very pleased with this. Satisfied could not be more satisfied. Surples was so satisfied that Harry and his Gryffindor trio didn't go to class one day. Do you know where they have gone? Surplis bumped Draco's elbow. I really haven't paid attention to the news within the school recently. Draco glanced at Sepulus. Not only do you not care about the news, you simply ran away without knowing where you were, and you were hiding from people as if you were running for your life. This can't be said to be wrong. Surprise touched his nose a little guilty. Wasn't he just hiding from others, hiding from the Gryffindor trio and avoiding Riddle? Kill him. Professor McGonagall left in a hurry, apparently to find these missing students, so there was no one to control discipline in the classroom, and everyone gathered together and started chatting. So you've been staying in Durmstrang lately, my friend? Pansy said suddenly. Pansy rarely participated in their exchanges. She had always been a gentle person and listened most of the time, so when she spoke, Sepulus hesitated for a while, but he quickly nodded. Yes, he answered Pansy's question, and then he saw some kind of hidden worry in Pansy's eyes. But the timing was wrong, and Surples didn't ask what was going on. He just smiled at Pansy and turned to chat with Draco and the others. They originally thought that Professor McGonagall would be back soon, but until the end of Get Out of Class, Professor McGonagall did not come back. There was even a temporary message saying that today was a day off and everyone should go back to the lounge and were not allowed to walk outside. There must have been some accident. Surplis glanced back at the stairs on the 4th floor on the way back to the lounge. Maybe Potter and the others have dug up a really big trap. After returning to the dormitory, Surples rarely stayed in the dormitory for a while, but he quickly ran to Wolf and refused to stay in the school any longer. He could more or less see that Principal Dumbledore actually knew that Riddle was in the school. He might even know that Riddle was with Quirrell. Even further, he also knew that Riddle's goal was magic, stone. Because if you say you don't know anything at all, then you are really sorry for Principal Dumbledore's title of the greatest white wizard. He, Surples, knew so much because he had an unexplainable blood relationship with Riddle. So how did Harry and the others find out so much? Just a few first-year students can accurately understand so much. Principal Dumbledore must let go, otherwise others will die. But why did Principal Dumbledore release the water? Sepulus didn't know. The only thing he could say for sure was that Dumbledore was not someone who would let his students die. So he made another bold guess. Dumbledore might be trying to gain experience for Harry. Just like those Night novels that Surples had read by chance, the Knight as the protagonist is the destined enemy of the Devil, and there must be a battle between them. During this period, the Knight will meet many people, who will give the Knight a lot of help, make the Knight grow, make the Knight stronger, and finally defeat the Devil. Harry Potter is that Knight, and Riddle, who is now possessing Quirrell, is the Devil. Principal Dumbledore may be positioned as the Knight's mentor who teaches and resolves doubts. The ending in the novel is usually that the Knight defeats the Devil, defeats the Devil's conspiracy, and then everyone ends happily. Although reality may not develop according to the novel, Sepulus feels that as a guy who is not clearly involved with the Devil, he might not have a good ending after the Demon King falls. What to do? Surprise conducted a series of meditations on this. He even asked Grindelwald and Wolf similar questions, which could be called asking for help. These two people are the two people he trusts the most. One is his father, and the other is a very close friend who taught him a lot. Surprise made up his own problem into a story, placing himself as a close associate of the Demon King, and then asked two people for help. He first asked if the Demon King fell, as a close associate of the Demon King, what would happen to him? What will happen to this cronies? The two people's answers without exception were that if the knight's mind was still good, this confidant would be exterminated. What if this cronies wants to live? Serpolis asked. Wolf was silent for a long time about this, and the final answer he gave was to tell his cronies to abandon the dark side and turn to the bright side. Since he knew that the knights would eventually win, he should join the knights' team earlier to avoid the final reckoning. Grindelwald's answer was naturally domineering and arrogant. He said that he would ask this confidant to set up his own business. Serpils thinks both of them are reasonable, but he is not sure whether Harry Potter can really win as a knight in the future. As for setting up his own business, is it a bit difficult for him? He was so entangled that he finally went back and mentioned the matter to Tom in the diary. Tom also fell into deep thought, and he finally gave Serpils a suggestion. He said, if you are not sure about the direction of the final story, why not try harder? Sir Prius asked him how he could call it harder. You can do things for the knight, and at the same time you can report the knight's information to the devil. In this way, no matter whether the knight wins or the devil wins, this confidant will at least keep his life. Tom said to Sepulus. Sepulus nodded. But the crony could be a little more exaggerated, Tom added. What's a better way to exaggerate? Serpils asked Tom, and Tom asked Serpils to guess first. Sir Prius looked at Tom's expression and carefully analyzed what he would choose if everything came to an end in the end. He was stunned for a moment, and then he looked up at Tom. If I were the Demon King's henchman, I would make sure that the Demon King would win, and then finally I would take his place. As soon as he finished speaking, his whole body began to tremble, not because of fear, but because of excitement. Yes, there is another option among the left and right options, which is to smash the things in front of you and then walk straight forward. Tom looked at Serpils and nodded. Obviously, that's what he meant. We are indeed the same. He said softly. I thought, Sepil's voice paused, I thought you were going to speak to that riddle. Having said that, there is no need for the two of them to use the so-called Demon King Knight to refer to each other. Riddle is me in the future, not me now, Tom said very unconcernedly. I chose you, what does he have to do with me? He looked at Sepulus with bright eyes. We will definitely be able to find a better path. We are together, Sepulus murmured. Yes, we are together. Chapter 51. Sir Prius stayed in Wolf's dormitory until dinner time before returning to Hogwarts. He actually fell asleep in Wolf's dormitory. Intermittently, he looked through Quirrell's body again. We arrived at the full story of what happened under the trapdoor on the 4th floor. He saw Harry arguing with Quirrell, or rather with Riddle on the back of Quirrell's head. It's a little intermittent and a little unclear. It may be because Serpil's occlumency has been very effective recently, so it was also blocked by Quirrell and Riddle. Sepulus saw how Quirrell walked into the restricted area, how he passed the three-headed dog named Luwei, and how he walked all the way until he finally stopped in front of a mirror. He fell silent, and soon, Harry came here. They had a dispute, attacked each other, screamed, and the scene became chaotic and spinning. He heard Riddle's angry voice, telling Harry, and probably also Sepulus, that he would come back. Sir Prius woke up with a start. What's wrong? Wolf had already sat down at the desk again. He turned around after hearing Serpil's movements, got up and went to the bedside to extinguish the ancient incense. You didn't sleep well. I had a nightmare. Sepulus rubbed his eyes, tangled his hair and sat up. But maybe I won't have nightmares recently, maybe it will come to an end. It should come to an end for a while. What Serpil said was still a bit vague, and Wolf didn't mean to force him to give an answer. He nodded slightly, then went to the desk and took out a hardcover book and handed it to Serpils. What is this? Serpilus took it in confusion. An additional Christmas gift, Wolf said calmly. I shouldn't be able to accept any more Christmas gifts from you, Bull. Sir Prius pinched the hardcover booklet with a guilty conscience. You've already given me something amazing. Bulwer Wolf's Christmas gift to Sepils was a ring with a huge black gem set in it. Sepils was not a good judge of goods, but he could also tell that this thing was worth a lot of money. Because the ring was sent directly to Ermengarde, Sir Prius took the ring and showed it to Grindelwald. After reading it, Grindelwald looked very complicated and asked Sir Prius what good things he did when he was in school. Son. Sepulus was confused, and Grindelwald told Sepulus that this gem was not just a beautiful thing, but was endowed with a very powerful magical blessing, which could make it immune to a large number of curses to a certain extent. It was not at all. It's something that can be described in terms of money. If you put it bluntly, it can be called a family heirloom. I seem to have seen a similar one at the Lestrange house before, Grindelwald said. As Grindelwald said, his hand fumbled for a while on the gem-embedded side of the ring, and then with a click, the gem opened, and a table surface floated out from the inside, which was a badge. Different from the simplicity of the ring, this badge looks to have been renovated, with a family crest on it. Whose family crest is this? Grindelwald frowned. Is it some upstart family? It's the Wolf family, it should be. Serpels leaned over to look at the family emblem and saw the wolf-shaped totem on it. I heard that his family is a newly rich family. Oh, upstart, Grindelwald nodded. As the guy who gave you a gift very popular at home. If he can come up with this thing, his status in the family cannot be lowered. Perhaps, Serpels said sarcastically, he is the eldest son in the family. He began to feel guilty now. He looked at the ring in Grindelwald's hand, and even felt a little anxious. His gift to Wolf was a pack of handmade candies made by himself, and a grey wool scarf that he thought suited Wolf very well. It wasn't expensive. What he thought at the time was that the Christmas gifts were quite meaningful, and he really couldn't afford more expensive gifts. Although he is now the adopted son of Grindelwald, and his guardian is Dumbledore, he has enough food and clothing, and for many of the remaining daily necessities, Draco is quite proactive and aggressive in paying for them, so that he really doesn't lack anything. He had no cash in his hand. He earned the money to buy wool scarves and give other people Christmas gifts by writing papers for senior students. But this, Hart, is very worrying when compared with the heirloom-level things sent by Wolf and verified by Grindelwald. Serpels was not worried that Wolf would find fault with him or think of him, but Serpels himself couldn't get over that hurdle. He always felt that he owed Wolf this. Grindelwald could see Sepulus's anxiety, and he said, "Tisk, it's okay, you can afford it if he gives it to you, and he also has other uses for this ring, let me show you." He waved his hand and sucked a piece of paper over, then pressed his right index finger on the ring. Then he lifted it up, blood oozed from his fingertip, and on the paper was the imprint of a family crest. With this ring, you can do many things in the name of the Wolf family. For example, you can use it to sign orders when eating, use it to sign life and death contracts during duels. Grindelwald told Sepulur. Seacon said, if you really feel sorry for yourself, work hard to revitalize the name Grindelwald in the future, and then you can even out the situation by giving him a family ring. Sepulus didn't have a better solution for the moment. He could only sigh and nodded. So when Wolf handed him such a booklet, saying it was an additional Christmas gift, Serpulus felt very guilty, as if he had a hot pie in his hand, and he couldn't eat it or throw it away. Then it's fine as a New Year's gift, Wolf didn't care. It doesn't matter if it's an early Easter gift. He didn't take Sepulus's hesitation seriously at all. He just handed the thing to Sepulus and then motioned Sepulus to open it and take a look. Serprius hesitated for a long time, and finally took the cover of the book and opened it. Inside is a bilingual document in German and English, a land deed. Seppels looked at the land deed with dumbfounded eyes, then looked up at Wolf, looked at the land deed, and looked at Wolf again, repeated many times, and his expression gradually became confused. What is this? Serpulus heard his confused voice ask. I bought a winery for you in the suburbs of Brandenburg. Wolf's voice was still calm. I mentioned it once that day. When I saw it yesterday, I thought it was good, so I bought it. Serprius lowered his head and glanced at the land deed in his hand again. Sometimes I really don't understand you rich people. Sepulus thought bitterly. Regarding this land deed, which made Serpels feel like he was facing an enemy, Wolf, the donor, was much calmer. I don't lack the money to buy a Zhuangzi. The Zhuangzi is already in your name, so you don't have to go back and forth. He said a calm word and settled the whole matter. Serpels took the hardcover book in a daze and was sent back to the fireplace by Wolf to return to Hogwarts. Okay, this is how you rich people play, right? He carefully stuffed the land deed into the bottom of his suitcase, and then decided to go out for a couple of walks to get some fresh air and relax his poor brain. Serpels left the dormitory and saw Pansy in the common room. Pansy stood up when she saw Serpels. It seemed that she was waiting for Serpels. Do you have time to chat? The girl's smile was gentle and calm. Sepulus nodded cautiously. He and Pansy had barely exchanged a few words with each other. They were very unfamiliar with each other. Now Pansy wanted to talk to him about God knows what. Do you have a good relationship with the Wolf family? Pansy asked this question again. Sir Prius nodded. You mean Bull, right? If you mean him, then I think I can indeed say that our relationship is not bad. After Serpolis answered last time, Pansy's expression looked full of worry, and this time she was even more worried. Sepals noticed it, and he paused. Is there anything you want to tell me about Bull? The Parkinson family, that is, my sister from a branch family, is engaged to be married to the Wolf family. The wedding will be in March this year, Pansy said hesitantly. This Christmas, my sister participated in the Wolf family New Year's dinner at the Wolf family. Serpals wasn't sure what Pansy was trying to express, so he hesitated for a moment and didn't answer. At the dinner, someone mentioned Mr. Bulwer Wolf's marriage. Pansy looked into Sir Prius's eyes and said slowly. Sepals was stunned for a moment. How old is Bourne? I remember he is underage. Pansy looked at Serpals and sighed softly. It doesn't matter whether you are an adult or not. In a family like ours, the marriage of the young will be decided early, because marriage is not our own choice. It's more like a collaboration between families. Serpals understood, so Serpals nodded. So, Pansy, what do you mean by telling me this? Because of Bulwer Wolf, he said at the dinner that he already has the person he likes. Pansy looked into Serpals's eyes. Bulwer Wolf has a dull and harsh personality, and he is surrounded by no one can be called the so-called favorite. Sir Prius understood this time. You mean, the person Bull is talking about may be referring to me? Pansy didn't say anything, but Pansy's expression said that was what she meant. Sir Prius waved his hand. No, Bull and I are good friends. You are overthinking, Pansy. Pansy looked at Serpal's face and sighed again. You grew up in the Muggle world, Serpals. You have to know that in the Wizarding world, same-gender marriage is very common, and it's not like you don't have the capital to be favored by the Wolf family. Sir Prius' hand paused in midair. I won't interfere with you. It's just a classmate. You are Draco's very good friend. I hope you will consider the interpersonal relationships around you more carefully. Bulwer Wolf is not a good match. Pansy's expression was serious. You may be misled by the one-sided impression he gave you. Of course, I know you won't believe me if I talk to you about this out of the blue, but I hope you can be more understanding. Get to know him better. Pansy smiled softly, but she also looked tired. Sepals looked at her smiling face and felt a little distracted for a moment. How old is Pansy now? They are in the same grade, probably 11 years old, but when she just mentioned that her marriage was a collaboration between two families, there was no fluctuation at all. A bit pitiful, Sepulus thought. He twitched his lips and thanked Pansy. Pansy probably had good intentions. After all, she did look worried. And it's not like Serpalus hasn't been worried about what Pansy said. Whose best friend gave you an heirloom ring for Christmas? There was also the title deed of the Brandenburg winery stuffed under his suitcase. Even if you were rich, you shouldn't give it this way. Draco got a high-end amethyst chain gold potion set for Christmas, and Theodore got a potion from a very long place. The quill pen with a long place name is said to be a limited edition and also ridiculously expensive. But it's not as outrageous as Wolf. Sepulus pressed his temples and said to himself, I'd better go back to the dormitory and sleep for a while. When I fall asleep, I will forget everything and won't worry about this bunch of junk things. Who wouldn't be good at pretending to be stupid, right? He just pretended to be stupid and dumbfounded until Harry Potter was discharged from the hospital. Although this incident is considered big news in Hogwarts, for Serpulus, the impact of this incident is not that big. After all, it has been broadcast live in his mind. Harry Potter foiled the mysterious man's big conspiracy, and although he was injured, he achieved great success. Almost everyone in Hogwarts is saying this recently. Harry had been lying there for almost half a month. When he came out, it was already the end of the semester. He had not taken any exams, so naturally he was not worried about this time of results. And the final exam also gave Sepals a good excuse to pretend to be stupid and not go to Wolf every day after spending a long time in the Hogwarts library. When the results finally came out, Sepals pressed his chest and thanked the teachers in each subject for their love. He kept his first place in the class. This way, I don't have to worry about my father Grindelwald having my legs broken, and I have an explanation with Wolf. I didn't mean not to find you. I'm really studying hard. Look, I passed the exam. First. With this as the basis, even in the end, Principal Dumbledore gave Gryffindor extra points like a mad dog, and he, Serpulus, didn't think there was any problem. Who is a good person who suddenly added 170 points? Do you think this makes sense? Sir Prius chewed a hazelnut chocolate ball on the long table, becoming even more convinced of the theory of knights and devils. He analyzed. The first year is over like this. When everyone went back to pack their luggage, Draco looked a little unacceptable. It's too hasty, Dumbledore is crazy. He may not be normal all the time. Seprus shrugged and bumped Draco's shoulder. It's a long vacation. Remember to write to me, Draco. The first grade may really have passed like this. As for Riddle, who doesn't know where he is going, and whether he has a completely clear emotional line, or even a plan for the future, who knows? They have just finished first grade, and they still have a lot of time in the future. Holiday life in Serples is quite comfortable. He spent most of his time in Nurmengard, but he did find time to visit the winery Wolf gave him. The winery obviously didn't care much about the change of owner. They just gave some explanations and introductions when Serples went to the winery, and a butler who looked very awesome. The property owner only needs to take the money and continue to take the money. The housekeeper will be responsible for the stable operation of the winery and generate good economic benefits, while the subordinate workers will also work hard voluntarily so that their wages can still be considerable. Sepulus is a mascot. No wonder it is said that rich people make money by themselves. This is indeed money making money on its own, without the slightest effort from Serpulus. The butler also asked Serples for his opinion, saying whether he should change the emblem of the winery or something. After all, the winery had changed hands. Serples waved his hand in panic and said no, and let the Wolf family let's hang the family crest properly first. From the very beginning, Serples' holiday life was indeed very comfortable. He achieved very good results in the final exam, which resulted in Grindelwald's more careful teachings. What's more, Sepulus could really afford to be gifted, which really gave Grindelwald a talent-loving child heart. And this talent still bears his surname in Dumbledore's name. It's hard not to like. As a result, Dumbledore suddenly wrote a letter, saying that he had arranged a new task for Serples. He hoped that Serples would help his classmate Harry Potter to remove Serples from Nurmengard. Transfer away. Who is Harry Potter? Grindelwald glared at the letter. Is he Dumbledore's favorite student? It was possible, but Sepulus didn't dare to say this to Grindelwald. He was not stupid, so why didn't he understand the strange atmosphere between his father and his guardian in advance? The encounter between gods and imps, Sepulus, he thought that he didn't really want to get involved in their twists and turns. He, Sepulus, was timid and cherished his life. Then let me go there. Sepulus carefully considered and spoke next to Grindelwald. It shouldn't take too long. Then he, Serples, was lying in the guest room of the Weasley family, and was laughed at by Tom, who was lying next to him. You really have the gift of a prophet, did you know that? Sepulus grabbed a pillow and covered his face. Maybe I don't really want to know. How did things become like this? Serples couldn't figure it out himself. At first, he was sent to the Weasley house by the Thestral sent by Dumbledore. The Weasleys' house is a very unique place. The house is very similar to Hagrid's house that looks collapsible but is unexpectedly strong. It is also a rickety house made of stones, which is several stories high. There are many chimneys that appear out of nowhere and what their purpose is, and there are windows that cannot be identified as belonging to which room. If you look at the architectural beauty alone, this house is a bit interesting, but if you insist that it is not good looking, in fact, this house is still a bit interesting. It even had a name, a sign stuck crookedly on the door that read, The Burrow. Mrs. Weasley welcomed Sepulus warmly, arranged a room for him, introduced him to her family, asked him what he liked to eat, and asked him to add more food to every meal. She was really a fiery and passionate mother. Mr. Weasley is much more stable. He works in the department of preventing the misuse of Muggle items in the Ministry of Magic. He looks quite serious, but he is also a very nice person and is very curious about everything about Muggles. I heard that Thorpe, after Russ grew up in the Muggle world, he repeatedly asked Serples many strange questions. The Weasley twins are also very interesting. Because of Cedric, the Weasley twins had a good impression of Serples. They became even happier after discovering that Serpils was not actually a well-behaved baby. Because Sepulus potion results were quite good, Sepulus became a so-called senior technical talent, and they studied some fever candy together. Percy Weasley doesn't feel very much like a Weasley. He's a little too sensible and normal, so he always feels a little out of place. But he's also a good person, and Sepils doesn't. I met him a few times. He spent most of his time in his room and only appeared on the table when eating. Ginny Weasley, the youngest child of the Weasley family, is a red-haired girl. She was a little shy at first, but after eating a few meals together, she became less afraid of strangers and would even take the initiative to shout "Go" to Serpils and go to the yard to get rid of the goblins. And when Sepulus used the floating spell to send away a large number of goblins, the little girl's eyes seemed to light up when she looked at Sepulus. As for Ron Weasley, he might be the only one in the family who doesn't welcome Sepulus very much, right? But seriously, who cares about him, right? You don't like me and I don't like you either. I'm not Jen Gallen. Why should I force myself to like you? Serpils pretended that Ron Weasley didn't exist. But when he arrived at the Weasley house, Serpils realized why Dumbledore asked Serpils to help Harry Potter, because according to Ron, Harry never replied to his letter. Neither did Hermione, and there was no response from Hermione when she called. Then what are you going to do? Serpilus asked Ron hesitantly, because Ron now seemed eager to try and have a big fight. Since you are here, it proves that Dumbledore also knows about Harry's situation and supports us to help. Ron waved his fist. Let's go and rescue Harry. How to save him? Sepulus shrank back and leaned on the back of his chair, as if facing a formidable enemy. We'll drive there, Ron said seriously. Let's drive there and bring Harry back directly. He said it seriously, and even put aside his previous suspicions and showed the car he was talking about. It should be Mr. Weasley's handiwork. It is a magically modified Muggle car that can fly and become invisible. Isn't this illegal? Surprise pointed at the classic car in the carport with a stiff look on his face. Who says it isn't? George Weasley put his arm on Surprius' left shoulder. If the Ministry of Magic wants to investigate, Dad will have to arrest himself first. Fred Weasley put his arm on Surprius' right shoulder. Surprise looked at the car with a slightly complicated expression. You just watch your biological brother act like this. Surprise continued to look at Ron with a complicated expression as he got into the car and fiddled with something unknown. He is a biological brother after all. George shrugged. Let's make trouble. Fred nodded slightly. Finally at night, after Mr. and Mrs. Weasley fell asleep, under the cover of darkness, the four of them got into the processed car and looked for Harry according to a map that really didn't look very reliable. Home. Why am I here? Sepils and Ron were sitting in the back seat of the car together, with unkind expressions. Wouldn't it be great if the three of you go? He can't drive, and he doesn't know the road, so staying here won't do much good, so why do you have to pull him out of the bed to get involved in these things? I'd better take you with me. After all, Dumbledore sent you here specially. George was driving in front. Hearing Serpils' words, he turned around and looked at Serpils. Okay, Sepulus sighed, you can bring Harry back today, then I will go back to Nurmengard tomorrow. My father must be bored in Nurmengard alone. Fred turned around and said, is Mr. Grindelwald really as grumpy as the rumors say and has two heads? Sepulus. The night was dark, the moon was bright and the stars were sparse, and the weather was good. Sitting in the back seat with the window open felt so relaxing and comfortable that Surprise fell asleep in the back seat. When he opened his eyes, the car had stopped. And he landed, still covered with two coats. Serpilus raised his hand in confusion, pulled off the two clothes on his body, then opened the back seat door, got out of the car and saw where everyone had gone. George and Fred were squatting on the stone steps by the roadside, holding weeds from the roadside in their mouths. They were carefree but extremely handsome. When the two guys saw Serpils getting out of the car, they waved to Serpils. It's a bit weird, it looks like he was going to steal something and is stepping on something now. Why are you here? Sepulus also waved and sat down on the stone steps next to the twins. Where's Ron? Ron, be smaller. You can get through the railing in their yard. So let's let him in and step on it for a while. Sepulus said, oh, but I remember, aren't you too good at picking locks? Surprius looked at the Weasley twins, and you used Ron to drill through the railings. Because he is a biological brother. So just make a fuss. The Weasley twins looked at each other and laughed. Soon, Ron ran back and brought back some information. Harry is locked up on the second floor. I looked and there was a window, but there was an iron grill outside the window. Sepulus looked at Ron. So awesome. Ron puffed up his chest and said, aha. What about the iron fence? He didn't feel proud for a long time, and soon began to worry. We can't use magic outside. The Ministry of Magic has very strict restrictions on the use of magic by minors. As the oldest of the Weasley twins, they are not yet adults, so they cannot use magic. It is said that every little wizard who has a name in the wizarding world has something like a thread on his body. This thread can help the wizarding world ensure that the little wizard will not expose his magic to muggles too recklessly. Anyway, the twists and turns involved actually involve a lot of things, but for ordinary children, these things are too far away from them and are not very important. Isn't there a screwdriver or something like that? Serpils raised his head and looked outside across the garden at the window that Ron pointed out. If there is a screwdriver or something, I might try to remove it. Try it. After all, he, Serpils, was still a muggle who grew up in the muggle world. For this kind of muggle product, he was still a little better than the three magical brothers of the Weasley family. What is a screwdriver? The Weasley twins turned to look at Serpils curiously. It's just tools. What do you use to tighten the screws? Sir Prius looked at the Weasley twins in confusion and gestured with his hands. Use magic to make the screw turn by itself, George said innocently. Sepulus silently held his forehead. Okay, if we don't have a screwdriver, let's think of another way. Serpilus pressed his head. Do you think if we just use a car to pull it, can it be pulled down by the iron fence? Try. It's no problem even if it doesn't work out. The Weasley twins looked at each other. If you really can't pull it off, go back and write to Dad, and then ask Dad to come over in person. Then why don't you call Mr. Weasley over? Why don't we go back first? Sir Prius took a step back slightly. He cherishes his life. He had met Harry's aunt and uncle. It was not a similar character, and he, Serpilus, was afraid. What are you afraid of? Just get on. Fred put his arms around Sir Prez's shoulders, and then half-hugged and half-dragged Sepils into the car again. There is no reason to get off the pirate ship. Woolen cloth. Sepulus still wanted to struggle. What? I describe myself as a pirate ship, this is not good. Then George helped close the car doors. Give up. Ron patted Sir Prez on the shoulder. There's nothing George and Fred want to do that they can't accomplish yet. Sir Prez's head was full of black threads, and he resigned himself to pulling out the rope from the trunk and preparing to tie it to the iron fence later. On a dark and windy night, when they were killing people and setting fires, they took off in their car and stopped steadily in front of Harry's window. Through the window, they could see Harry's owl, Hedwig's, placed by the window cage. Harry is on the bed, sleeping soundly now. Fred opened the passenger window and started tapping on the glass. Harry's sleep quality is good. After knocking for a while, they didn't wake Harry up, and they didn't dare to make too much noise for fear of waking up Harry's aunt and uncle. Fred turned to complain to Ron. Maybe he brought earplugs. Ron was a little embarrassed for a moment. Seamus in our dormitory snores, and everyone wears earplugs when sleeping. How many people are in your Gryffindor dormitory? Serpils joined in the conversation. It's not as rich as Slytherin. George's voice sounded from the driver's seat. Gryffindor is famous for its large number of people. We all live in the same dormitory. Fred and I. My dormitory is a 4-person dormitory, and baby Ron's is a 5-person dormitory. Sepils couldn't help but think of his huge dormitory, and he sighed in his heart. It seemed that Slytherin was really rich. But in the end, despite their persistent knocking on the glass, Harry didn't wake up. Hedwig woke up. She flapped her wings and hit the cage, which actually woke Harry up. When he got up, he was startled when he saw a black shadow outside the window. When he opened the window, his expression still looked like he thought he was dreaming. Why are you here? We're here to pick you up, Serpils said, showing his face from the back row. Are all your things in the house? We'll take you away in a moment. Harry was obviously still in a bit of a state of shock, but he quickly came to his senses under the blowing night wind. My luggage is all in the stair storage room on the first floor. It's easy, I'll go. Fred simply gestured to George. We will open this fence later, and then I will help you get your things. Sir Prez pressed Fred's hand. then turned to look at Harry. Harry, do you have the key to your aunt's house? Harry was stunned for a moment, then jumped suddenly. Yes. I have it in my bag. I'll get it. You go in through the front entrance. The main door on the first floor was quietly opened. Fred and Ron ran to help Harry get his things. George and Serpils were guarding the car. After about 10 minutes, the 5 people crowded the car and swayed. He flew into the sky and rushed towards the burrow. So it's better to have someone with some brains at home. Fred whistled in the passenger seat. If we were the only ones here, we would have to demolish it violently. George also smiled, turned around and rubbed Sepulus' head, making Sepils quite embarrassed. They returned to the Weasley house under the cover of night, because there was no interruption and it was still dark. The twins parked the car quietly, and they sneaked upstairs and returned to their rooms. What should Harry do? Who will he stay with tonight? Ron suddenly asked. With Sepulus. George thought for a moment. Let's say tomorrow that Dumbledore sent Harry to be with Surprise. Fred added. Will Mrs. Weasley believe this statement? Surprius' brows jumped, but whatever, he was a little sleepy, so he put his arm around Harry's shoulders. Let's go to bed. Harry. Oh. Of course Mrs. Weasley didn't believe it. She was furious that the Weasley twins dared to take the family car and sneak out to pick up someone by themselves, but when Supler took Mrs. Weasley's arm and said more jealously that Harry couldn't even eat enough at his aunt's house, he couldn't do it. Mrs. Weasley's anger was somewhat calmed as she left the room. She let the twins and Ron go, but turned around and asked Harry to eat another bowl of rice. I just said there must be a smart person in the family. Fred bumped George's elbow. I'm 100% sure what you said makes sense. George bumped back. The twins burst into laughter, and Ron rolled his eyes. Cyprus stayed at the Weasleys for another 3 days before leaving. At this time, he had already lived at the Weasleys for more than a week, so when he returned to Ermengarde, Grindelwald's greeting to him was throw a slipper in his face. Dumbledore's taste in recruiting students is getting worse and worse. Grindelwald sat on the sofa, blowing his beard and staring. It's better that I teach you well. If you follow him, you will be taught to be a little old-fashioned. Quote. Sepulus didn't dare to answer. He folded his hands in front of his chest and pinched the slipper, saying, yes. Maybe Grindelwald discovered the slight perfunctoriness in his words, so he spent the rest of the vacation being arranged to fight Grindelwald. Thank God Grindelwald can't use a wand, but seriously, just his silent spell is enough to make Sepulus crawl. Dad, Sepulus collapsed on the ground like a piece of plasticine. I can't do it anymore, I have no strength anymore, please let me go, I'm still a child. Grindelwald would only snort at this, then raise his hand to check his watch. Take a break for 5 minutes, you can't be worse than that Potter. Serpilus. Wow, why do I have to suffer in your story? But he was weak and pitiful, and he didn't dare to resist. He could only grumble, and then get up after 5 minutes and continue to be beaten. This time when the owl from Hogwarts came, Surprise burst into tears as if he was facing an amnesty. Hey, Grindelwald looked at Sepulus' worthless look, what's wrong with you? Let me tell you, you are fighting the students in your greenhouse and small garden, and the students in the entire school are not interested. I can definitely beat you, I tell you. Surprise blinked. Is that exaggerating, Dad? You don't believe it. Grindelwald glared at Sepulus. As for Hogwarts, I'm not shy about saying that it's like the little greenhouse flowers raised by the students. It's all about talking on paper and there is no practical course at all. When it comes to a real fight, my mind will go completely blank. I probably won't even be able to use any of the weapons to get rid of you, so I can only stand still and get beaten. Even if I can't hide, I won't be able to escape. I just thought you were complimenting me, Dad. Sepulus scratched his hair. I will write to Dumbledore and ask him to arrange a dueling club for fun. You think I was your father and I casually blew up half of Durmstrang. I also went through it. You've been practicing for a long time, okay. Grindelwald snorted, and his tone was actually a little proud. Should I be proud, Dad? Surprius looked away with a guilty conscience. No wonder the students at Durmstrang had bad expressions when they heard my name was Grindelwald. Some people also specifically warned me not to do dangerous things in school. Experiment. I dare you to say that this is a problem left over from history brought by you. New school year, new atmosphere. Grindelwald suddenly raised his hand for a pen and paper and wrote an address to Sir Prius. I did well in the exam last year. I will continue to work hard this year. At this address, there is a person named Vader Rosier. Women will give you money. Use the money to buy some gadgets you like. Sir Prius pinched the address and felt it was a bit hot. What should I call this Ms. Rosier? Just call Aunt. Grindelwald waved his hand. She deserves it. As for if she asks you about me, just say I'm very good. After saying that, he seemed to want to explain something extra. When I was in jail, I gave her my property when I no longer needed it, so you can just use her as a bank. Sir Prius's eyes widened a bit. Wow, how could it be like this? But Grindelwald didn't give him any chance to hesitate. After all, Grindelwald was a person who said whatever he wanted, and was even a little fickle. When we arrived, we had to do it. We immediately asked Seppels to book a ticket to go to France to meet this Ms. Rosier. So, are you leaving now? Seppulus was a little reluctant to leave before carrying his small suitcase and stepping into the van. I'll be back after another holiday. Don't miss me too much, Dad. Go away, just write a letter and remember to send back the delicious ones. Grindelwald waved his hand and watched Seppulus get into the van, and then watched the van fly away, gradually turning into a distant place. A small dark dot. You can't sit still knowing that I'm sending Seppulus to see Vader. Grindelwald looked away, his eyes falling in the air, not knowing where he was looking. Vader and I are really fine. Vida Rosier is still unmarried. Dumbledore's voice sounded very softly. There was no emotion or anger in it, but it was replaced by Grindelwald's laughter. Jealous. If Sir Prius was still here, he would probably think that Grindelwald was covered in something dirty. He had never seen Grindelwald smile so happily. The van this time was hired at a high price. Sir Prius really didn't want to experience the journey of the night bus. Unless one was extremely poor, Sir Prius didn't think anyone would have one. Normal people would prefer to use the night bus to travel. Thanks to Wolf, he is now the one with the wallet to buy an entire van. Then this year's Christmas gift should be a little more expensive. Sir Prius leaned his chin and looked at the scenery outside the window, but it couldn't just be expensive, that would be too nouveau riche. When he arrived at Rosier Manor, he carefully provided Grindelwald's piece of paper to the guard at the door. The guard went back with the paper and placed Seppulus in a small living room. And that Ms. Vida Rosier didn't keep Sir Prius waiting long. She arrived quickly, walking in a hurry but still dignified and beautiful. She looked probably younger than Grindelwald. Time left traces on her face, but it did not take away her beauty. She stood in front of Seppulus, her lips moved, but she did not speak. Instead, she looked at Seppulus's face carefully. Aunt Rosier. Seppels obediently bowed and saluted. Father said I can call you this. Vida Rosier's expression changed slightly. Did he ask you to call me that? It was not Seppulus's illusion. He saw tears flashing in Vida Rosier's eyes. What's going on? This can't be my father's previous romantic debt, right? Sir Prius clenched his fist to prevent himself from taking a few steps back and losing etiquette. Father said that everything is fine with him now and told his aunt not to worry. Sir Prius hesitated and then added. If this is really my father's romantic debt, I'd better coax him out. Seppulus, right. Rosier held Seppulus's hand with tears in his eyes and nodded gently. Rosier Manor is your home. Come back when you have time. Come back and see your aunt. She is really beautiful, and the love in her eyes cannot be faked. Help your aunt take care of your father, okay? She said softly, took Seppulus's hand, and held Seppulus in her arms. Sir Prius hesitated for a moment, then raised his hand and patted the woman's back. Poor man trapped in love. Rosier stayed with Seppels for 3 days. Regarding money, she said she would ask someone to open an account for Seppels at Gringotts in England, and gave Seppels a checkbook. Yes, the wizarding world also uses checkbooks, asking Seppels to sign whatever he likes, and the family has plenty of money. So can I afford Diagon Alley? Sir Prius looked at the checkbook and thought silently for a while, but still didn't ask this question. But Nurmengard can be renovated. Rosier also gave Seppulus a ring, which had a similar function to the one Wolf gave him. It was something that could be stamped to show his identity. For a moment, Seppels missed being in Wolf. Golf. I don't know how he spent his vacation and what he was doing. As for other things, including food, clothing, and entertainment, Aunt Rosier packed a carriage of boxes for Serples, although most of them were not for him, Serples, but for Grindelwald. His father is really charming. Serples stood in his bedroom, watching Aunt Rosier from a distance through the window in the back garden, instructing the servants to carry boxes one by one into the carriage, with a complicated expression. It's amazing, Sepulus sighed. Tom floated behind him, with a slightly complicated expression on his face. It's very impressive. Although you are not your father's biological child, you two are of the same origin. Quote? Sepulus wondered, when did I become a disaster? Tom raised his eyebrows. Wolf. This. Serpulus felt a little guilty when he said this, and he really couldn't refute it. Malfoy, Tom said again. This is not it. Serpulus' eyes widened. This is really not it. No. Tom looked at Serples looking for words to clear himself up, and snorted in his heart. He was just not as obvious as Wolf. Maybe. Tom didn't embarrass Serples. If you don't think so, then it's not. Is there anywhere else you want to go before school starts? Tom changed the subject. There are still a few days left, there's still time. Surprius pursed his lips, tilted his head and thought for a while. Oh, yes, there is a place I want to go to, Godric's Hollow. My father said before that I would take 2 photos of him if I go there. Since I have time, I will go there. He took a detour to Godric's Hollow, which was indeed a picturesque and beautiful place, a semi-wizard settlement, not too big, with a small square in the center and a war monument-like building in the center. There are several shops, a post office, a bar, and a small church whose stained glass windows radiate like jewels across the square. Surprise didn't stay here for long. He simply stayed here for an afternoon, from noon to evening, catching up with the sunset in the valley. It was very beautiful and breathtakingly beautiful. He took a photo and personally picked a large bouquet of roses on the hillside. You don't have to do this with your own hands, Tom said disapprovingly, floating behind Serples, looking at the scratched fingers of Serples from picking roses. Maybe I should. Sepulus shook his head. Mr. Grindelwald is very kind to me. Picking a bouquet of roses for him with my own hands is nothing. Tom snorted, knowing that Serples was just as stubborn as him, so he didn't care anymore, and just asked Serples to remember to put medicine on his finger for a while. What do you think love is, Tom? Surprise held the bouquet of roses and watched the sun set. The surrounding sky faded from warm orange to rosy purple, and finally lost its light sadly. Under such circumstances, it's okay to be a little sentimental. I don't know, Tom answered simply. I don't know either. Sepulus stared at the place where the sun was sinking, and sighed for no reason. I know a little about the twists and turns between my father and Mr. Dumbledore, but I don't understand how a demon king who is in full swing can be captured without any help. I don't know what my feelings are for imprisoning myself in a tower isolated from the world, and I don't understand how Aunt Rosier can still expect news about her father alone when she knows that there is no possibility for her and her father. Tom followed Sepul's line of sight and looked toward the darkening sky. Love is so scary. Yes, Sepulus sighed, love is terrible. Surprius returned to the Tower of Nurmengard with the photo and the rose. Grindelwald looked at the rose in silence for a long time, and then took the initiative to ask Surprius for the wand for the first time and cast it on the rose. Life spell. Life spells, advanced black magic, require the caster to be extremely capable, and they need to harm themselves to achieve their goals. For example, Grindelwald paid some blood this time, and the blood made the bouquet of roses look more delicate and fresh. I'm interested. Grindelwald looked at the rose with a heavy gaze. I only mentioned it to you once, and you actually remembered it. That was before Serples went to school in the 1st grade. I didn't expect that Serples would actually go. It should be. Sepulus scratched his hair. Father, you just like it. He didn't expect Grindelwald to have such big mood swings, so when he saw Grindelwald's reaction, he felt a little embarrassed. It's really just a matter of picking some roses, it's not a big deal. Surprise did not stay in Nurmengard for a long time, because even the task of renovating Nurmengard could not fall on him. Rosier had already submitted a report to the relevant departments, and then worked hard to push it forward. The renovation of Nurmengard. Wow, Dad, Aunt Rosier likes you so much. Sepulus made a fuss next to Grindelwald. Grindelwald's reaction to this was to roll his eyes at Sepulus. Go to your school quickly. I complimented you a few times and you are now floating in the sky. As he watched Sir Prius walking into the van, he actually felt a little more reluctant to leave. It seems that having a son is indeed a good thing. Grindelwald looked at Sepulus reluctantly holding the window open in the van, and suddenly smiled. Be safe, you brat. Then he looked into Sir Prius's wide eyes and smiled. Your bouquet of roses actually has this effect. Tom sat next to Serpils and complained in a corner where Grindelwald could not see. I never thought about this. Sir Prius waved goodbye to Grindelwald until the carriage lifted up and distanced itself from the high tower of Nurmengard. I was very emotional at the time. Not love. Tom raised his eyebrows. Don't we both understand what love is? Serpils shrugged and looked away from the window. I wonder if Riddle will cause any trouble again this year. It's better to be merciful and don't let him catch you and torment you. Madmen don't want to be reasonable with others. Tom gave a series of warnings. Sepulus nodded in deep agreement. Their destination was Diagon Alley again. They still stayed above the Leaky Cauldron, and they still spent most of their time in the bookstore. At that time, Natasha was accompanying Serpils, but Natasha was bored. Now Tom is accompanying him, and Tom was able to watch it with Serpils and give surprising feedback. You two look like twins, Natasha hummed as she came back to life after hibernation. Really? It can't be ignored. Sepulus tilted his head and thought of what Riddle said to him at that time. Just think of us. What he said might be a bit proud, so Natasha let out a burst of disgust. Really, let's start school quickly. Once school starts, you can't be with Tom every day. This brought smiles from Sepulus and Tom. The purchases for the new semester were once again taken over by Draco. Carrying a checkbook was a bit useless. Serpils felt that this was not possible, but he didn't know what to buy, so Serpils went to Diagon Alley. After looking around for a long time, I finally found someone who wanted to try my luck in Knockturn Alley. Sir Prius did not go as he had promised, but went back to the Leaky Cauldron and spent 2 small sums of money to find out with the bartender what Knockturn Alley was. After inquiring, Serpilus felt that he could not go yet. It's a bit dangerous. Sir Prius pointed at the entrance to Knockturn Alley on the map. Don't go and get into trouble again. Indeed, you don't have to give gifts for now. They also felt that it would be better to be more stable. Don't add any extra burden. It will be bad if something goes wrong. Adhering to this belief, Sepulus stayed in the Leaky Cauldron again until the first day of school came, and he took the Hogwart again with his luggage, Tom in the bag, and Natasha in his arms. Express. This time is no different than last year when school first started, when he sat alone in the box and only chatted with Natasha. This time, the few people around Draco and the few Slytherin friends automatically and consciously came to Serpils. I knew you must have arrived early. Blaise was the first to push open the box door and come in. Long time no see, Sepils. Long time no see, Blaise. Sir Prius greeted him. Although there had indeed been unpleasant exchanges between the two of them before, those were no longer important matters. Now they have a good relationship and can be regarded as friends. Our defense against the dark arts teacher has been decided this year. Blaise smiled and held his chin. Are you curious who it is? I've read the book list. Sir Prius thought for a moment. To be honest, I don't think the book this teacher asked us to buy can be used as a textbook. I think it's a bit perfunctory. It seems like novel. I feel like this year's defense against the dark arts class will be another disaster, maybe even worse than when Quirrell was here. Blaise snapped his fingers. Accurate, because this teacher is indeed less reliable than Quirrell. Sepulus's expression collapsed. Isn't that reliable? Isn't Quirrell not at the lower limit? This year's defense against the dark arts teacher is the author of these weird textbooks, Gilderoy Lockhart himself. Blaise laughed. I guess he can turn the class into his private fan meeting. Sir Prius's face darkened. I'll make a report when I get back. If I really use that textbook to teach, I might as well study on my own. I went to Flourish and Blott's bookstore these 2 days, and the walls were full of that idiot with his 8 teeth bared. Laugh there. Blaise responded with a burst of laughter. Why are you smiling so happily? Draco was the third person to enter the box. Long time no see, I heard Blaise laughing outside. I'm laughing at our new defense against the dark arts professor. Blaise smiled and sat up a little straighter. Oh my god, Sepulus adjectives are really amazing. That idiot has 8 teeth bared. Laughing there, ha 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 ha, you were really good at speaking, Serpilus. Sepulus rolled his eyes. Soon, everyone gathered in this box. After a holiday, there are many things we can talk to each other about, whether it's where we went during the holiday or what happened to someone else's 8 trigrams. My sister also entered Hogwarts this year. Halfway through the conversation, Daphne suddenly became serious. Draco, I can't control you and I don't want to. Everyone else should stay away from my sister. Forget it. If she harms Draco, don't harm anyone else. Sepulus blinked. Daphne's sister, Astoria, is not an easy character to get along with. Blaise became Daphne's mouthpiece. To be honest, I feel that Astoria was brainwashed and possessed by your family. Come on. What kind of magic trick? Serpulus was a little curious. He took out a licorice wand, unpacked it and stuffed it in his mouth. Tell me about it. It's too much to say in detail. It's boring, Daphne snorted. My sister completely believed what her family said, and believed that a woman's greatest achievement is to find a high-ranking husband, then raise her husband and raise her children, and become a certain the mistress of the manor. She said, rolling her eyes without concealing her disgust. This is really stupid, isn't it? Blindly expecting to be chosen by a man. She said and stretched out her legs to kick Draco. You can't really like this one, can you? The weak and harmless daughter flower. Draco glanced at Daphne, and then his eyes quickly glanced at Serpul's face. I don't like it, but my father asked me to take more care of the little sister of the Greengrass family. Blaise suddenly laughed. Why do I remember that Mr. Malfoy also asked Pansy like this? Normal, Pansy answered herself. My family is also asking me to contact more candidates to prevent me from being unable to enter Malfoy Manor in the future. My vacation in France this holiday is actually a blind date in a sense. Quote. Surprius said, wow, where is Theodore? Not many girls are willing to take the initiative to join the Knot family, Theodore said calmly. It's not yet time, but my advantage is that no one will force me to get in touch with any random people, and there won't be any unsightly relationships. Limit me. After he finished speaking, he raised his hand and took out the paper towel on the table to wipe the corners of Serpul's mouth. There are cake crumbs. Blaise laughed again. He turned his head and whispered something to Daphne, which made Daphne bend over with laughter. Draco is the only one who is the most pitiful, Blaise smiled. He has to chat with all kinds of girls. He said it teasingly, making several people laugh. Even Pansy laughed. Draco's face turned dark when he first knew he had to take good care of me. He didn't know what to do. In the end, I had to buy it. He rushed to pay for something. Draco's face began to turn red, and he coughed a few times in an attempt to stop the teasing of several bad friends around him. Finally, he gave a heavy hum and emphasized, I don't like you, and I don't like Daphne's sister either. It's all about rushing ducks to the shelves, and I can't help it. Sepulus looked at Pansy's expression and was frozen for a moment when Draco said, I don't like you, but soon, her face became gentle again and couldn't find anything wrong, laughed. A few people laughed and chatted all the way from the Hogwarts Express to the carriage. First-year students have to take a boat to Hogwarts through that pier, but students above first-year students have to go to Hogwarts by boat. Went back to the castle in a carriage pulled by Yechi. Is there really something pulling the carriage? Daphne looked at the carriage's shaft in the air curiously. Who among us can see it? Theodore, Blaise touched his chin. Although it's a little offensive, you witnessed Mrs. Knott's death. Only those who have witnessed death can see the Thestral, because it is the messenger of death. I can, Theodore said without any expression on his face. You can see it too, Blaise. Oh, yes, I can too. Blaise spread his hands. I forgot which father I was. He fell ill and died suddenly in front of my eyes. I can do it too. Sepulus looked at the skeleton-like Thestral in front of him. I forgot, I see too many dead people. Brace said, wow, look, what kind of magnanimity is this, so handsome. Sepulus made a face. It's not handsome, because sometimes you have to help dig graves and bury them. Everyone will see it in the end, Theodore said at last. No one can escape. Don't be curious. The atmosphere was good and everyone was happy until they entered the auditorium and sat down at the Slytherin table when Hermione Granger came over. To be precise, Hermione was not looking for them, she was looking for Serpulus, but the Slytherins all stopped their movements in a tacit understanding and waited for Hermione to speak. Hermione looked anxious and embarrassed, but there seemed to be some hope. Seprus, she said, have you seen Harry and Ron? Sepulus blinked, a little confused. I didn't see it, what's wrong? They're gone. The hope in Hermione's eyes disappeared. I didn't see them in the car. I thought they were looking for you. Draco suddenly leaned forward and hugged Serpil's waist. Half of his body was pressed against Serpil's, and his chin rested on Serpil's shoulder. You are already like Potter and the others. Are you ready, Sepils? Sepulus blinked. But Hermione seemed offended. You can't restrict Serpil's friendship with Malfoy. Serpil stayed at the Weasley house during the holidays, and they are friends. Serpil felt Draco's arm around him tighten a little. Did you go to Weasley's house during the holidays? You even refused to go to Malfoy Manor when I invited you at Christmas. Quote. Sepulus tried to slap Draco's hand away. It's not that I don't want to go. Didn't I say that I wanted to go back to Nurmengard to be with my father? How come I just don't want to go? Then if you have time during the holidays, you would rather go to the Weasleys' house than go to Malfoy Manor to find me. Draco refused to let go. You can go back to my house next time. Sepulus. The Knot Manor can also be on the list. Theodore's calm voice joined the discussion. Zabini Manor is also joining in the fun. Blaze's participation was purely to watch the fun and not take it too seriously. Hermione's face turned green and white for a while, then she stamped her feet, turned around and left. Hey, everyone is so angry. Sepulus patted Draco's hand on his waist. Let go, good brother. Draco watched Hermione leave before letting go of Surprius' hand. I really don't know when you got on such good terms with Potter and the others. Draco complained half seriously. Surprius coughed. Don't blame me, it was because Potter was kept at home during the holidays and was not allowed to go out. Dumbledore was worried and asked me to help, although I didn't play any role in the end, just it simply appeared, maybe it was acting as a mascot. His explanation was sincere, and Draco had no intention of going into details. However, relying on Serpil's current guilty conscience, he decided that Serpil would visit Malfoy Manor as a guest. Draco is still a good trick. Blaze clicked his tongue on the side. Theodore, don't you invite Sepulus. Theodore just looked at Serpil with a gentle smile on his face. Do you remember the magic ceiling I told you? Surpris thought for a while and felt that a bowl of water should be served evenly, so he nodded. Go and go too. The sorting ceremony was nothing interesting. After all, there were no newcomers worthy of attention. Ginny Weasley, whom Serpil knew, went to Gryffindor like a bunch of brothers in the family, and Daphne's sister Astoria also went to Gryffindor. Entering Slytherin without any suspense. She was indeed a pretty little girl, but she didn't look much like Daphne. She was quite well behaved. As for when Dumbledore introduced the new defense against the dark arts professor to everyone, Serpilus's face turned into brownie cake on the table. Why did you find such a professor? Serpilus angrily poked at the cake of the same style as his own. Let go of that pitiful piece of cake in your hand, Serpils, Dumbledore can't help it. Blaze smiled, and pressed Serpil's hand across the long table. Hogwarts, the defense against the dark arts class here is very expensive, so few people are willing to take the initiative to come. After searching around, Dumbledore finally found such a guy with a big tooth. Sepulus rolled his eyes. How long do you want to remember my words, Blaze? Blaze shrugged. That's not necessarily true, but I feel like I'm happy with this sentence this year. He smiled, dragged the battered cake away from Surprius, and replaced it with a piece of wine-soaked pudding. Eat something sweet and be happy. Sepil snorted and accepted Blaze's kindness. After eating and drinking, the opening ceremony ended. Daphne did not take much care of her little sister, but left her to get along with her first-grade classmates. Astoria looked at her sister with tears in her eyes, and once again asked for help. His eyes turned to Draco. Daphne had nothing to do with herself, and everyone else gathered around to watch Draco's good show. For half-grown children, 8 trigrams is a very happy companion. Listen to your sister. Draco pressed his eyebrows a little irritably. Go find your friends. The little girl left a little reluctantly. Blaze watched the person walk away before he began to tease Draco. Wow, you don't know how to cherish the beauty at all, Draco. No matter what, there is a certain possibility of him entering Malfoy Manor. You treat people like this. Shut up. It's my father's business that he likes her. Whether he can enter Malfoy Manor or not depends on me. Draco punched Blaise, paused, and then spoke again. I don't like her. Yes, I know you don't like it. Blaise leaned on Daphne, covering his shoulder that was punched by Draco. It's useless for you to show your loyalty to me, Draco. Who should you face? Say it to whom? The tips of Draco's ears turned a thin layer of red, and he seemed to be planning to hit Blaise again. Blaise turned around and ran away, laughing as he ran. Draco has someone he likes. Serpils was a little confused. He leaned close to Theodore and asked in a low voice, Brace seems to mean so. Theodore glanced sideways at Sepulus, his beautiful eyes curled up. No way, look at there are so many girls around him, who knows which one he will like. Sepulus thought for a moment, felt that he seemed to understand something, and nodded. Theodore looked at Serpils and smiled even happier for some reason. Pansy, who was beside them, listened to the whole story, and her expression began to become complicated. She suddenly glanced in Draco's direction with a sympathetic look, and felt herself relieved. Everyone slept well on the first night. By teasing Draco, everyone put down their arrogance and played wildly for a while, but when they woke up the next day, everyone was a noble young master and lady again. Slytherins have very little fun, and everyone is usually cautious and doesn't give others anything to talk about. But someone from Gryffindor couldn't stand it and brought the topic to him. What is that? Sepulus chewed his piece of bread, and while he was thinking about whether to go with bacon or pickled hairtail, he looked up to see the changes on the Gryffindor table. I don't know when the long Gryffindor table spread out into an open space, leaving Ron Weasley completely free. There must be at least 2 meters around him, except for Harry Potter, who was sitting opposite him. Tay was still sitting stiffly. And there was a strange red envelope floating in the air between them. In the gap between Serpil's questions, the red envelope began to smoke. That's a roaring letter, Draco said with a gloating smile on his face. As for its purpose, you'll know it soon. Serpils nodded doubtfully and continued to look up in the direction of Harry and the others, while Draco reached out from behind him and covered Serpil's ears. What is this for? Sepulus asked Draco with his eyes. But the next second he knew why. Because even with Draco covering his ears, he could still hear it clearly. It was as clear as a sound exploding in his ears. The huge sound filled the auditorium, and Sepils felt that he might have heard it. The dust on the ceiling shook down. The breakfast that was not put in the cover will be eaten soon. Quote. I wouldn't be surprised at all if they fire you for stealing a car. Let's see how I deal with you then. You probably haven't thought about how your father and I felt when we found out that the car was gone. Quote. It was Mrs. Weasley's voice. She was usually a witch with a clear and loud voice, but now her voice was amplified countless times, making the plates and spoons on the table clink. I received Dumbledore's letter last night. Your father was so ashamed that he almost died. We worked hard to raise you, but we didn't expect you to do such a thing. Everyone listened to Mrs. Weasley's rage until finally, when she had finished speaking, the letter burned and curled into ashes. Wow, Sepulus patted Draco's hand, indicating that he could put it down. I never want to receive such a letter in my life. Really, I will hold a grudge against anyone who sends me such a letter. Lifetime. So what did Potter and the others do? It feels like they caused a lot of trouble. Draco looked at Harry and Ron, who were pitifully becoming the focus of everyone's attention, and turned to ask Blaise, do you have any news, Blaise? Blaise Zabini, thanks to his salon queen-like mother, is also a well-informed guy. As soon as Draco's question came out, he happily snapped his fingers. I'm the right person to ask, Blaise laughed. Potter and the others did indeed do some amazing things yesterday. How amazing is that? Serpilus asked in a dignified manner. The Hogwarts Express is no longer popular. Potter and Weasley flew all the way to Hogwarts in a magically modified Muggle car. Blaise said with a smile. The modification of a Muggle car is not something that 2 second-year students can understand, so it must be the work of Mr. Weasley. Mr. Weasley has been suspended from the Ministry of Magic for review. Quote. Sir Prius blinked and suddenly remembered the flying car at the Weasleys' house, which he had also ridden in. Serpils crossed himself to Mr. Weasley in his heart and hoped that the Ministry of Magic would not go to Weasley's house to conduct a search. Mr. Weasley has a lot of little inventions. If he really checks them carefully, maybe the situation is quite serious. Then what? Draco laughed. That Weasley was rude to my father a few days ago, and now he has to suffer a lot. he really raised a good son. Their flying car was seen by many muggles and caused some minor troubles. Besides, Potter and the others probably didn't know how to drive. They hit the Whomping Willow when they landed. God Blaze was mysterious, said secretly. The Whomping Willow was hit. Sepulus was a little stunned. When he was running around the Black Lake, he stopped numerous times because of fatigue to look at the landmark Whomping Willow. Every time, he could basically see the Whomping Willow twisting around fiercely in place. Is it really not the Whomping Willow that hit the car? Serples murmured. Actually, it can be regarded as the Whomping Willow hitting a car, right? Blaze thought for a moment. I didn't see the specific scene, but according to reliable information, if Professor Snape hadn't rescued people in time, Potter and Weasley would have died. I'm going to get a beating from the Whomping Willow. It sounded very reasonable. Sir Prius nodded, and once again established in his mind that the Whomping Willow was the ceiling of combat effectiveness among the weird things in Hogwarts. Why would something so lethal be planted in a school? Sir Prius sighed again. And when they went to the greenhouse for herbal medicine class today, Serples saw the Whomping Willow hanging from a branch with a bandage. It has a Halloween atmosphere. Draco followed Sepulus' gaze and commented reservedly. Sepulus felt that Draco was right. Professor Sprout walked over from the Whomping Willow with many bandages on her arms. Apparently she had just bandaged the Whomping Willow and then came to teach everyone, but her face was not that good. A little irritable. Professor Sprout is a little irritable. Sepulus started to feel weird again. Sprout is the headmaster of Hufflepuff, a short witch with a patched hat on her gray hair, and her clothes are always stained with mud, because she is always idle. In the greenhouse, with her favorite plants. She is a notoriously good-natured professor. But Sepals didn't feel weird for long, because within a few seconds, Sepals felt that she knew why Professor Sprout was irritable, because following her was Sepals with a big toothy smile. Gilderoy Lockhart was annoyance to Ploss. He was spotless from head to toe, wearing a flowing turquoise robe, and a turquoise top hat with a gold rim on top of his shiny blonde hair. He was so formal. Serples looked at him with disgust. He was a bit of a coquettish person. He followed Professor Sprout. Although he didn't know what he was talking about, he watched his mouth keep opening and closing. He shouldn't be a green frog, so he should be a green frog. He just kept chattering something. Oh, hello. As he approached, Lockhart greeted the students with a cheerful face. I just showed Professor Sprout how to treat the Whomping Willow. But I don't want you to think that I study herbal medicine. I am more knowledgeable than him. I have only encountered this wonderful plant a few times during my travels. Professor Sprout's expression worsened. Hey, Harry, Lockhart suddenly called out affectionately, I've always wanted to talk to you. Harry, Professor Sprout, you won't mind if he's a minute or two late, right? Professor Sprout's expression should indicate that she minded, but before she spoke, Lockhart put his arm around Harry's shoulders and took Harry away. When did Potter have friendship with Lockhart again? Sir Prius followed the others into the greenhouse, and his nose was once again filled with the smell of damp soil and fertilizer. You don't know if you didn't go to see the excitement, Draco laughed sarcastically. Lockhart really likes Potter. He took many photos with Potter in his arms at his new book conference, and even took the photo of The Prophecy, the headlines of the Daily News for 2 days. I've never subscribed to the Daily Prophet again, Sir Prius said with a disgusted expression. I feel like it's just an 8 trigrams newspaper, and its reporters are not that good. It's not as interesting as an unpopular tabloid. What's it called? The Quibbler. He stood next to Draco and listened to Professor Sprout asking everyone to pick a pair of earmuffs and take them in their hands. He and Draco symbolically competed between pink and black. Finally, Sir Prius took the pink one, waved his wand and turned the pink earmuffs into Slytherin's beautiful green, and added silver decorative lines and a handsome and beautiful little snake. If I were Professor McGonagall, I would definitely give you extra points, Mr. Grindelwald. Professor Sprout's eyes noticed Sepulus's movements, the expression on her face softened, and she looked towards Sir Prius smiled. Thank you, Professor. Serples smiled, and then handed the much more beautiful earmuffs to Draco. Give me the black one. Draco's eyes switched between the 2 earmuffs, and handed the black one to Serples. It's really unfair. How come your transformation skills have improved so much all of a sudden? Your final exam there will definitely be no need to review. Sepulus responded by bumping Draco's shoulder. Yes, I am going to study 4th grade courses this year, but I only take our second grade exams, so of course I don't need to review. Harry was delayed outside for at least 5 minutes before entering the greenhouse. His face actually looked a little bad. After he came back, Professor Sprout stood up from his chair and started the formal class. Today we are going to repot the mandrake, Professor Sprout said. Does anyone know the characteristics of the mandrake? Hermione was the first to raise her hand, which was expected by everyone. Mandrake, also called mandrake root, is a powerful restorative, Hermione said loudly. It is used to restore deformed people or people under a spell to their original state. Very good. 10 points from Gryffindor, Professor Sprout said with satisfaction. Mandrake is an important component of most antidotes. Does anyone know more? Professor Sprout said this to everyone, but he actually looked at Sepulus. The professors really have great expectations for you, Draco laughed, but I really didn't read the book and said there are other uses. You don't really know it by chance, do you? If you say that, I suddenly don't want to know, Sir Prius frowned, then turned to Professor Sprout. It acts as an anesthetic and has analgesic effect. Very good. Professor Sprout nodded with satisfaction, 10 points for Slytherin. Draco looked at Sepulus in surprise. Really no. What do you think I'm doing during the holidays, just writing and reading? Sepulus raised his chin proudly, I'm pretty awesome. Draco looked at Sepul's proud face. Yes, it's amazing. Sepulus didn't expect Draco to respond to his words so easily. He tilted his head and glanced at Draco with a little doubt, and then nodded slowly, right. The second-year courses are not too difficult. With Grindelwald's encouragement, Sepulus feels that he can try to take the ordinary wizarding level examination, or OWL, now. Normal students need to take the 5th-year exam. Talent test, and many people can't get a lot of certificates, but now that Sepulus is so confident, he feels that he can't give it a try. So when he was boiling snake eggs in the fire ash in Professor Snape's office, Sepulus tentatively mentioned it to Professor Snape. Professor Snape used that terrifying look of, "What are you talking nonsense?" to show Sepulus that he felt guilty. He lowered his head and continued to heat the crucible honestly, but at this time Snape the professor snorted. Ask again when you were in 3rd year, Professor Snape said. Sir Prius nodded like a potion, and then continued to look at the pot in his hand. This was his first time trying to boil a love potion, a very complicated potion, and it would take almost a month if it goes well. Sepulus hopes everything goes well. He guarded the cauldron at Professor Snape's place until almost curfew. After watching the color in the pot turn into a reasonable and correct milky white, he threw a keeping charm on the cauldron and returned to the dormitory. The 2nd grade had more courses than the 1st grade, and there were also a little more homework. Sepulus originally planned to finish his homework and then go to Wolf's place for a walk, but he took a look at the amount of homework, thinking that he might have finished it all, so he threw the notebook and parchment roll into his bag and went directly to Wolf with his homework. When Sir Prius walked out of the fireplace, he didn't see Wolf. After a while, Wolf came out of the bathroom with only a towel tied around his waist and the water on his hair. Coming, he nodded towards Sepulus. I thought you were going to ask me why I came here at this time. Sepul's eyes got lost on Wolf's chest muscles, and he was attracted by a drop of water. He vaguely wondered why he was not the one. Where are the water droplets? They slide all the way down the skin, pass through the ravines with clearly defined muscles, and finally disappear into the invisible place under the bath towel. He was startled, his face felt hot after realizing it, and then he looked away in a panic. You will come. Wolf seemed not to notice Sepulus's momentary panic, but took out a towel and began to wipe his hair. I'm waiting for you. Sepulus was stunned for a moment and caught the meaning of his words. Were you waiting yesterday too? Well, Wolf nodded, and the water stains on his hair snaked down his neck beyond the towel. I don't know when you will come. With these words, Sepulus felt soft and wished he could go back to yesterday, holding his collar and asking himself why he didn't come to see Wolf and why he was too lazy to sleep. Feeling guilty, he took the towel from Wolf's hand and went over to wipe Wolf's hair. I went to bed yesterday because I was a little tired, he said. The more he felt guilty, took off his shoes and climbed onto the bed with a towel, leaned behind Wolf, next to Wolf's warm, exposed skin, and felt inexplicably that he was about to being burned. I should have told you. Wolf just turned his head, his eyes fell on Sepulus' face, and then he shook his head gently. If you come, it's never too late. Sepals felt that his ears were very red. He looked away in a panic and let out a vague, Wolf didn't say anything anymore. He turned around again, sat obediently on the edge of the bed, and let Surprise wipe his hair. The atmosphere was ambiguously intense. Surprise felt that his face might be burning too much. He finally wiped Wolf's hair dry. He stammered in a panic and said that he was going back to school first. There is something else. Wolf nodded silently and did not hold back. He just took a bouquet of wrapped blue roses from the bedside and handed them to Surprise. I bought them a few days ago. I think they will match you. Sepulus took the rose, feeling that it was worth more than 1,000 gold and very hot to touch. Okay, thank you, then I'll go back. He almost fled back to the bedroom, holding a bouquet of roses in his hand and stepping out of the fireplace with a slightly dull expression. Tom floated in front of him and looked at Sepulus carefully and critically. You look as stupid as if you were hit by a troll. Surprise coughed, touched his face nonchalantly, then turned a glass on his table into a vase and stuffed the roses into it. This is the first time I have received flowers in my life. You have to forgive me. Sepulus plucked the petals of the rose and suppressed the blush on his face. Tom didn't care that Surprise received the flowers. He just nodded and asked Surprise, where is your homework? Sepulus was confused. Sepulus was stunned. Sepulus stood up with a sudden sound, rolled and crawled back into the fireplace, and was very embarrassed. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.